started the meeting recording right now. All right, so welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon, for the Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Board Listen and Learn session on conceptual draft rules regarding the social equity in cannabis program. My name is Kathy Hoffman, and I'm the Policy and Rules Manager for the agency. And joining me today are Justin Norton, our Policy and Outreach Director, Becky Smith, our Director of Licensing, and Caitlin Bamba, our Senior Education and Policy Manager. I'd like to open our session today with some opening remarks from Board Member Garrett. One thing before we get started, just ask that everyone stays muted until we call on you. And if you could turn off your camera until we do call on you to provide feedback, we would greatly appreciate it. So I will hand it to Board Member Garrett, please.
Thank you, Kathy. I just want to welcome everyone to the Listen and Learn today, and thank you all for participating. And hopefully we get a lot of comments and things on what we are trying to accomplish here today. I wanted to kind of give you a little history to for those who might not be familiar on how we got here today and the things that the LCB has done over the last couple of years. And I think it's actually could be exactly 2 years ago today or this month, the LCB did 3 meetings, outreach meetings to the community to hear from people how they felt like they got left out of the industry, things that we did that could have been different, and the impact that it had on all of you that tried to get in that got left out. That led to the LCB creating the bill that actually got passed that formed the Social Equity Task Force. So from listening to you all from all of the outreach sessions that we had and understanding that there are things that could have been done different to be more inclusive on social equity and others, people of color getting into the industry, we drafted a bill and led to the Social Equity Task Force. So based on that, and all of our staff has been participating and listening in on all of the Social Equity Task Force meetings and hearing comments and things from the community. During the process of listening to what was being said, we actually opened up our CR 101 and began the rule process back in, I think it was October, to say we want to be ready when the task force come to us with recommendations. Let's get the ball rolling to where we can make this process and get to some results of being able to issue license sooner than later. Based on the recommendations that we got from the task force, the rules that we came up with is reflective of all of the recommendations except for being race-based. Other than that, what's going to be we're working from today is going to be a reflective of the recommendations from the task force. And what we wanted everyone to know is, as we're putting these rules together, and our goal is to be able to create something and have rules to where we can start issuing license for the license that we have to issue sooner than later and not spend years tied up in court. So that's how we came up with the rules and the recommendations that we end up that we have as part of this CR 101 and listening and learn session. So we are trying to be more inclusive, go over what we're trying to do, and to hear from you. Are there things that we hadn't thought of? Are there things that's going to lead to any type of unintentional consequences that we need to be aware of as we're going through putting the rules together? So once again, I want to thank you all, and I'm looking forward to hearing this process today. Thank you. Kathy, back to you.
Thank you, Board Member Garrett. All right, so I hope everyone's had an opportunity to take a look at the agenda. Just going to go through it briefly, and then we'll move into our slide presentation that we have to kind of guide our conversation today. Going to pause briefly and check in with Justin, Becky, or Caitlin. Any additional remarks or comments you wish to offer before we get started?
Yeah, so for those who don't know me, I'm Justin Norton, Director of Policy and External Affairs. And I just wanted to say, I'm really excited to see we have, including our staff here, but we have over 100 people on this listen and learn session, and that's just really fantastic. I'm really excited about this. We've sat in on a number of the social equity task force conversations, listening in and even participating at times. And one of the things that we appreciated that we saw, especially as it developed through the course of time, was a lot of really good constructive feedback, and that's what we're hoping to get here. This is really focused around the rules. We understand the experiences people have shared in the past, and so what we're trying to do with this particular conversation is pave the pathway forward so we can, as Ollie said, get the licenses out and issued. And so if you have the constructive feedback on the different sections of rule, we'd really appreciate that and see how we can fine tune this so it's the most effective that we can and also has sustainability moving forward. So we can mitigate any unintended consequences. So really appreciate everybody being here, and I look forward to your feedback. Thank you.
Thanks,
yeah,
Justin.
I'm going to jump on that, Kathy. Again, my name is Becky Smith, and I'm the Director of License and Regulations and the lead for social equity for the agency. I just have to say that I thank all of you for taking the time this afternoon to join us. That I know it's a long afternoon, but it's important for us to receive your feedback about what you think about the application process, because you'll see that throughout the rules, that what you think about the that how many times that somebody can apply for a license. We want to hear from you. So I hope that if you don't have the maybe the time to do it this afternoon to provide the feedback, give it to us in writing. But we want to spend the time to make sure that we haven't missed anything, because we know that that there's pieces of the rules that we need to make sure are clear and understandable. So again, thank you for taking the time, and I appreciate the next few hours.
Okay, thanks, Becky. Caitlin, anything?
Hi, everyone. My name is Caitlin Bomba. I'm a Senior Policy and Education Manager in the Licensing Division, and just echoing what everyone else said already, very happy to be here and hear the feedback. It's very important to us for this process. So thank you, Kathy.
Thank you. All right, with that, turning back to the agenda, I think we've sort of covered our first section here from 105 to 115. Caitlin and I will go, I will go into the rule project background very briefly, and then the draft conceptual rule structure, and then Caitlin's going to speak to the connection between the social equity program rules and our licensing rules. And then we'll begin receiving your feedback, and we're looking forward to receiving your feedback on each section of the draft conceptual rules. So we have these broken out by section. You'll see here 314.55, 570 subsection 1. We've got 5 minutes set aside to talk about that with you. And then at 1:30, we'll start with the next section of rule. When the section of rule is introduced, we'll ask that you raise your hand, and our policy and rules coordinators, and this is my opportunity to introduce them now, Robert Despain, Audrey Basic, and Jeff Kildall, will call on you. There are other options if you are unable, say you're calling in, if you're unable to use the hand raise feature, if you're not joining us today with on Teams or on the Teams app, you can send your comment to our rules inbox, and that's RULES, rules at lcb.wa, So rules@lcb.wa.gov. All right, so I'm going to move into our slide deck. Let me bring that up here. All right. All right, so I just want to touch briefly again on what's already been shared by my colleagues here. Our overall meeting goal today is to engage with you, our industry partners and other interested partners, to review conceptual draft rules. And our intentions today are to truly walk through these rules with you, elicit feedback in a structured fashion, and then we'll talk about next steps at the end of the session today. Why are we here? Board Member Garrett has already shared the bulk of the information there. There's been an extraordinarily large amount of work that happened up until the time that we filed our CR 101 and after. We received task force recommendations on January 6th, and those are largely incorporated into the draft conceptual rules that we'll be discussing with you and hearing from you about today. What do we do with the data you share today? We take the comments that are received and we put them either into an Excel workbook or a table. Then we organize them by theme and we analyze them to determine whether or not there's anything that was offered today that we need to think about incorporating into the draft conceptual rules to move them to a place that we can put together a rule proposal that we would then present to the board for consideration for permanent rulemaking. And we'll put that table on our outward-facing website. It also becomes part of our rule development file and part of the rule package that will become part of the rule proposal. So I just want to touch briefly on meeting protocol today. Justin and I will be facilitating the conversation. So when we get to the rule section, he and I will share and calling on our rules coordinators to call on you to speak to each rule section, and we'll be interacting with you in that way. We have a variety of LCB staff joining with us today, but our primary subject matter experts today on the rules are Becky and Caitlin. And again, we thank you for participating with us. And then all of you, the participants, we're looking forward to hearing from you. All right, so some guidelines for this participation section today. First of all, we want to just really encourage folks to share ideas and solutions. And if there are debates we want to have outside of the session, we're looking forward to that outside of the session. But today we're really hoping to hear, learn, and listen from you about what you like and don't like about these rules. Really hope that we're all able to appreciate the diversity of perspectives that all will bring here. And we really hope that folks can stay focused on contributing to the substance of the rules today. We know that there's a lot of interest in these rules, and we want to keep the topic focused on that. We really encourage everyone to participate to the extent possible. We do have, I think, around roughly 30 minutes for folks to react and respond to rules. So we're hoping that's enough time for everyone to offer a couple minutes of feedback or maybe some language you think we should think about in that space. When you are called on, we're hoping that you're able to share your name and let us know where you're from if possible. Not necessary, but always kind of nice to share that with others. And then hoping that we're all able to speak one at a time so we're able to get down your comments and record them in a meaningful way. We want to make an opportunity for everyone to speak. So for instance, if we have a 30-minute segment and 30 people raise their hands, that means each person gets 1 minute to speak. So we're hoping to accommodate everyone, but if there's some overflow, again, please don't hesitate to send your message to rules@lcb.wa.gov. And again, just a secondary reminder, we are recording the session today. All right, so how are we going to do this? Well, as I showed you on the agenda, we'll introduce the rules section. People who have raised their hands will be asked to speak in the order that we see those hands raised. And then again, speaking time will be limited based on the number of people wishing to speak to a specific topic. It might mean that we end early. It might mean that we end just a few minutes over, but we'll try to gauge that time as best we can. And then when we do call on you, we're hoping that you'll offer what you like, what you don't like, and hopefully some alternative language on the conceptual draft language that we've offered in the conceptual draft rules. All right, so I'm just going to take a couple minutes to briefly talk about the rulemaking process. We've got a lot of information about the rulemaking process on our outward-facing webpage, so we're happy to share that information at the end of the session. But truly, there are 3 stages. These are all governed by the Administrative Procedures Act, and we are currently in stage 1. So that's this guy right here, pre-proposal statement of inquiry. This means that the agency's opened up some rules for consideration, and we are in the second phase here, the stakeholder engagement process. Following this process, we will do some additional rule development, move into our rule proposal phase. That's where we take the proposed rules and some forms, present them to the board, and a hearing date is set on the rule proposal. At the hearing, we do take oral testimony that becomes part of the administrative record. The agency can respond to those comments by either revising the rules and setting a new hearing date, or not revising the rules and moving forward to permanent rule adoption. All right, and now I'm going to hand it over to Caitlin to kind of walk us through the social equity application process.
Thank you, Kathy. So we wanted to share a flow chart, and we hope that this will be helpful for us all to see the proposed framework of the social equity application process at a high level before we go over the rules in more detail. You will have an opportunity to provide feedback on this process as we go through the rules. The process detailed here is intended specifically for determining social equity applicants and prioritizing which applications will be processed. So it's important to note that other licensing requirements established in law and rule must be met before receiving a cannabis retail license. This process is reflective of the recommendations from the Social Equity and Cannabis Task Force and the draft rules that we'll be discussing shortly. So to briefly walk through the visual flowchart that we have here, first step, the applicant applies at Business Licensing Services during the 30-day application window. The Liquor and Cannabis Board will then receive the applications from Business Licensing Services. After the 30-day window is closed, the Liquor and Cannabis Board will send all the applications at one time to a third-party contractor. The contractor is responsible for reviewing and scoring all of the applications. The Liquor and Cannabis Board will then receive all scored applications from the contractor. So due to the limited number of available licenses in each jurisdiction, the highest scoring applications will be processed first. If there are applications that have the same score, the Liquor and Cannabis Board will contract with an independent double-blind lottery to determine which applications will be processed. Then the applicant will be issued a preliminary letter of approval and must complete the remaining licensing process. So again, please remember, this is a draft of the process, and we're looking forward to your feedback on this process. So with that, I'll turn this back over to you, Kathy.
Great, thank you, Caitlin. All right. So moving on to our next slide, we are ready to start taking a look at the rules. So if I may, I'm going to bring those rules up. And I hope everyone can see this. I'm going to try to keep it all on one page. There are parts of the rule that may go on to more than one page. So I will try to move through the rules slowly so no one gets dizzy while I'm scrolling. To that end, though, just want to introduce this first new section of rule. And again, this is conceptual language. This new section, so this is 314.55.570, describes the purpose of this rule. And what the agency did was hope to sort of anchor these rules in language from RCW 6950-335, and so that's part of the legislative intent of House Bill 2870 that led to that specific set of, or that part of statute, pardon me. So inviting any comment, we've got 5 minutes, I believe, set aside for comment here. So welcoming any comments on this first section of rule, and that's 314.55.570 subsection 1, and that is purpose. It looks like I see some hands raised. So Audrey, Robert, or
Sorry, I'm trying to get to them right now. I have 4 hands up right now, and they all kind of popped up at the exact same time. I'm going to read them in the order that I see them from top to bottom. I have 5 hands now. So starting with Rep. Deborah Entenman is first, and after her will be Peter Manning is up after Deborah Entenman.
all right, thank you. So have we unmuted Representative Entenman, Robert?
Yes, I am now unmuted.
Thank
So
you.
my question is, does a person have to meet both the criteria of being in a low income area and a high enforcement area? Do you have to meet both?
I think we're going to get to that section in a few moments, Representative Entenman. I'm wondering if you might have any comments on this purpose statement to begin with. Otherwise,
That is a part of the purpose. If I am reading the purpose statement that is on the screen before me, that is a part of the purpose statement.
Okay.
You don't have, usually when as legislators, we have lines. You don't have lines on here. But if you are 6 lines down, it says, legislation found that by creating a social equity in the cannabis program will further an equitable cannabis industry by promoting business ownership among individuals who have resided in areas of high poverty and high enforcement of cannabis related laws. Can you be one or the other, or do you have to be both?
Thank you. That's a great question. Go ahead, Becky.
So Representative, you do not have to be both. That you actually have to meet 2 of the criteria, but not all 3. So there's 3 different criteria that we're going to ask for social equity applicants to meet. So you do not have to meet both.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Up next is Peter Manning, and after Peter Manning is Christy Stanley.
Do we have Mr. Manning?
So you may
He's
have to
still
unmute him.
muted.
So we're having some trouble unmuting him. Just a moment, I'm sorry.
So Peter, this is Audrey. You should have the ability to unmute yourself now. If you see an icon with a microphone, if you can click on that, you should be able to unmute yourself. Maybe we can come back to Peter later
Yeah,
down the list.
Yeah, so after Peter, up next is Christy Stanley. And then after Christy Stanley, I just have someone listed as guest. Um,
All right, so we see Peter on the screen. Can you unmute Peter?
Christy is unmuted and ready. And then maybe we'll circle back to Peter just after.
Hi, I'm Christy Stanley, and I am from North Kitsap, Washington. And I have a question about the purpose, whereas it relates to disproportionately impacted areas, being areas of high poverty and high enforcement of cannabis-related laws. I think that goes on into Section 2, Part B, whereby it starts to describe more about high unemployment, low income, arrests, etc. The board will provide maps to identify. Is there a timeline for that? Do you know how long it will be before this is decided, or has this already been decided?
So go ahead, Becky.
So thank you for the question. So we're actually working with the task force to receive information about the DIA areas from the University of Washington. So we reached out to them. I reached out to them again yesterday, and their timeline is April 1st. As soon as we receive those maps, we are designing that program to be out-facing, so the public can also see that.
Thank you.
April 1st, but April 1st is when we're supposed to receive that data.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Christy.
And as one little piece of admin, if after you finish speaking, if you're able to lower your hand, that helps us as well in monitoring the queue. Can we circle back up to Peter? Peter, are you able to unmute yourself?
We can't hear you. So perhaps, Peter, if you could send your questions or comments in through our rules inbox. Do you have access to email right now? Is that a possibility for you? Okay. If you could do that, it sounds like we've got some more technical things to work out with you.
One option for those who are having difficulty with their microphone, if you could try plugging in a pair of headphones with a microphone on it, sometimes that helps.
Yeah. All right, Robert, any other hands that are raised?
Right, we have three more, and it's the first one is guest. That's how they enter their name. After them would be Philip Petty, and then James Buchanan. So guest, if you want to unmute yourself, go ahead.
Oh, there we go. Just clarification. My name's Ross. I'm sorry, it's guest. I just want to clarify that this window opening is for all license types. There's no real clarification. I've seen some verbiage for retail licenses, but does this apply for tier 1, 2, and 3 licenses as well?
This is just going to be retail at this time.
Okay.
Becky, Caitlin, anything to add there? No? Okay. And again, this purpose statement it's a very general purpose statement that was taken from the legislative intent of House Bill 2870. But thank you for that question. That's a great question. Robert, who might be next?
So we're going to try one more time on the suggestion, I think, of Justin. I've elevated Peter to a presenter just to see if maybe that'll help him.
It most definitely does.
All right.
So can I speak now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes,
Peter.
sir.
Hey, I'd like to give my condolences to the individual that was killed doing his job at the cannabis store the other day. That's a sad situation. I understand the LCD is going to address that next week. But we here at Black Excellence Cannabis are very saddened by that. We would like to know if there's a GoFundMe page, if somebody could reach out to us and let us know. I am concerned about this, the qualifications, because I don't think that you guys put anything in there that would recognize gentrification. At the time of in the late 80s and late 80s and early 90s, I lived in Seattle in impoverished areas. I stayed in the South End. I lived in the CD for a time. We were completely overwhelmed with law enforcement when it came to cannabis as well as cocaine. Since that time, there's been a lot of gentrifying. We no longer live in those areas anymore. We now live out in Skyway, Kent, and other places. So how do you equate that or put that into this? My second question is, I'm not too comfortable with the qualifications. We started out with qualifications, which were 3 that should have been met, but now we're down to 2. This avenue actually opens up, like before, to say, I've been here before. It's almost like a deja vu when we did I-502 and how we were kind of excluded out of that whole thing is the reason we're all here today. And we're kind of creating a pathway, not mirrored, but similar. And how do we protect ourselves from doing that again? How do we miss those people like myself and other people that were in the industry then? You know, it seems like we're going to overlook that. And I think that we should probably do a little bit more thing. I think we should stick to 3 qualifications, but not so much. But the gentrifying is what I think needs to be addressed. We got to look at those people that were there. How are you guys going to determine who was where and when and so forth? That's it. Thank you very much. And please, if anybody has any GoFundMe issues or information on that individual that was killed out there in Tacoma at the pot shop doing his job, please let me know at Black Excellence Cannabis so we can try to get that guy and his family some support. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter.
So I just wanted to clarify, Peter, that our maps, the DIA maps that we're going to receive from the University of Washington are going to take into consideration I can't even say it. And it's based on time frame. So it is going to be based on time frame. So I just wanted to make you aware of that.
All right. Thank you very much, Becky. And thank you, Peter, for your
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And I think you're aware LCB is very concerned and share in with you and your condolences on these tragedies that are happening in our retail facilities. All right. Robert, are there other hands we have not gotten to yet, or are we able to move on now?
We have 3 more. Philip Petty. Then after Philip is James Buchanan, and then Justin. So Philip, if you're able to unmute yourself.
Just promote me. Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Philip, we could hear you if you're able to unmute yourself again.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, this is Phil Petty, Washington State African American Cannabis Association. Was on the original task force this year. And I noticed that you said in the beginning that you were using recommendations that the task force made. Ollie Garrett was able to talk about the rubric that we had put in there because using statistics based on arrest records in Washington, people of color, particularly Black people, were arrested at a far greater rate. The areas that are outlined in the demographics that you're identifying as the war on drugs, those areas were predominantly had people of color. Now, there were other people that lived in those areas, and my concern and question is, how would those folks, would they have the same ability even though they weren't arrested? And I know that that's part of the criteria if you were arrested with a marijuana or drug charge, as well as did you live in one of these areas? And then I'm confused, why wouldn't your color be part of that, since you're using that information? When you gave us all the statistics, the ACLU gave us all this information that you have available, why wouldn't we use that information to define who was affected and harmed by the war on drugs? And if this is social equity, those people, which are Black people, were affected the most. And so the economics in those communities were affected the most. So why wouldn't the people that were affected the most not be able to get in line? This is my analogy. If you were harmed and hurt the most, and a guy came in with a cut finger and you had a heart attack, who would you, the doctor, go see first? The guy with the heart attack or the cut finger? So Black people were harmed. So why wouldn't you use color? And I know that Governor Inslee just had a bill, 98.01, where he rescinded that, and that color can be used. And I think it's vitally important, because if you don't do that, then the people that were harmed the most, and brown people, are going to get left out like they did in the first time you handed out these licenses. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Petty. All right, anybody else with a hand raised, Robert? I think you said, or I just want to turn to the panel. Anybody want to offer any feedback additionally to Mr. Petty? To colleagues, okay. All right. Anyone else, Robert?
Yes, up next we had James Buchanan.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me?
We can, please. Go ahead. And
Can you hear me?
you're kind of cutting in,
Hello,
cutting
everyone.
in and out now.
Having a great day. I want to add some of the things that Peter said himself. Social equity.
So, Mr. Buchanan, we're having a really hard time. Go ahead.
Hello?
Yeah, that's a little better. Yeah, that's better.
Is that better? Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Okay, good. Social equity was created in cannabis because it wasn't equitable, specifically for African Americans. The statistics that the state provided said we were harmed. We went to prison and jail 4-to-1. And you guys had charts that showed Black, Hispanics, Native Americans, Asians, and others. And as we create how the licenses are given out, it's not going to make sure that they're given out in the same proportion that we were harmed. So my question is, how will you make sure that African Americans receive licenses based on the same rate that we were harmed? Number one. Number two, I think that the reason why you say you can't use Black is because that's what is said before. Phil had pointed out the executive order that the governor signed, but then you also say because it's risky, because you could be in court and have lawsuits, but I don't think you're considering the lawsuits that are going to come. I'm not going to say if, when these licenses get in the wrong hands. There's no way to to control gentrification that's happened, and be able to determine, you know, folks that have moved when different races have flown. We're using statistics, you know, that show from the state on how different areas were harmed, but all those areas were changed. And the way the language is and the rules that are submitted in front of us, it allows for the races that weren't harmed to get the licenses even before the ones that were. And the reason why is African Americans are only 3.5% of the population. So it's going to be a numbers game on everybody flooding to fill out these applications. So my question to you is, how are you going to deal with this when they get in the wrong hands? Because you're looking at going to court if you use race, but when they get in the wrong hands, you'll be in court also. So I guess the question is, do you want to be in court on the right side of things or on the wrong side of things? Thank you for this time.
Thanks very much, Mr. Buchanan. I want to take a moment here and just recognize we had 5 minutes set aside for this first section, this purpose section. And so I know that there are other people who wish to comment. What I'd like to do is invite folks who are waiting to submit comments in writing to our rules inbox, because we really would like to get to all the language in the rules. And we've got, I think, about 5 more sections to go through. So if I may, I'd like to move forward and just want to check in with my colleagues. Sound like anything to offer before I do that? Justin, it looks like you're going to say something.
I can make mine real quick.
I think that's a good idea to move into the next sections, because most of the questions that are coming up are pertaining to language that is introduced later. And so, you know, we want to make sure that we're capturing that feedback. And so it's not that folks aren't going to have a chance to speak. It's let's get those in line with the different sections so we can keep track of that feedback appropriately. You know, in the broader sections. And what we're trying to gain feedback on right now is just this little section 1. It's a paragraph, and we have a you know, number of different sections to go through that are more, for lack of a better term, meaty as far as the content of that language. So if you can bear with us, that would be great until we get to those sections, and then that way we can have that constructive feedback there. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks everyone for understanding, and please again submit feedback to rules@lcb.wa.gov. With that, I'm going to go ahead and move forward into section 2, and that's our definitional section. Got several definitions here, and again, I do apologize. We are running a little bit behind now. We are scheduled for a break at 1:55, and it's currently 1:48. So what I'd like to do is, if folks don't mind, maybe go until 2:05 on this definition section, take a 5-minute break, and then come back to it. We'll have to modify our agenda slightly for that reason. So I'll just walk through these with everyone. And again, apologize. I'll try to go slowly so you don't get dizzy looking at the screen if you don't have a hard copy in front of you. First of all, we defined average state income. Next is disproportionately impacted area, and just want to offer that as part of House Bill 2870, and then again, that's codified in RCW 695355. The agency was charged with coming up with some rules and some definitions around what disproportionately impacted area means. We defined double blind lottery because that term is used elsewhere in this rule set, and I think Caitlin spoke to that, where a double blind lottery might be used in this process. We also defined family member, and this is the definition that was offered to us in recommendations by the Social Equity Task Force. So we've taken that exact language and put it into rule, conceptual rule. We also define the word person because there are different entities that might be applying for a license beyond just a person. There might be a business or someone else. We also define preliminary letter of approval. We defined further social equity applicant, social equity contractor, social equity licensee, and social equity plan, which again appears in the enabling legislation for the social equity in cannabis program. And I'm just going to slide down here, and those are the extent of our definitions. So in much the same way we did the last section, and again, we really truly are looking for feedback on the language that you see before you. Any definitions that you would suggest we change, any suggestions on definitions we might add. This is the kind of feedback we'd like to solicit from you at this time, and we've got, let's say, till 2:05. So Robert, how many hands do we have up?
So
And,
currently we only have two hands up, and it's now we have three.
Okay.
So the first person up is Susan Stoltzfus. After Susan is Justin, and then Ryan Lee.
Very good. Okay, Susan, please. We're looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much. I'm speaking to the definition of average state income, top of page 2. So it says here, most recent median household income and the per capita income, but the qualifications for applicants on page 6 only speaks to household income. So I'm just wondering about the and in that sentence.
Okay, so, okay. Take that down. Any feedback from folks, Justin, Becky, Caitlin?
Yeah, no, that's definitely something to look at.
Yeah.
So this is a really good, so thank you for that, because I think this is a really good point to highlight. This is the type of feedback that we really need to have on some of the technical issues, because if the intent of these definitions don't apply or translate into the other parts of the rule that enables those references, we need to clean that up. So yeah, if you see a disconnect between what a definition is calling out and what later language calls out, that's perfect type of feedback. So thank you for that.
I would also like to just point out quickly that using state median household income really puts people in Seattle at a disadvantage because of our cost of living being much higher here. Our median household income, as well as per capita income, is 25,000 more than the state average.
Great, thank you very, very much for that. Susan, are there any other things you'd like to offer before we move to the next person?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your comments. All right, Robert, who's next?
So next up is Justin, and then after Justin, we have Ryan Lee, and then two more people have raised their hands, Rep. Deborah Intinman and Emerald City Collective.
Great. All right, so Justin, please, we're looking forward to hearing from you.
Hello, thank you for taking my question. My question isn't really on the definitions, but really a word that would help eliminate some of the definitions being used. And I think limited licenses would really help eliminate a lot of these definitions that we're using, because if we unlimited and made the licenses open to whoever wanted to participate in opening a retail marijuana business or production of marijuana or delivery of marijuana, that would allow for a free market, and it would allow for anybody who had the ability or the desire to go into this business to get a license and therefore be able to produce and make a living for themselves. And limiting licenses brings up the definitions and who is allowed to get the licenses and why they can get the licenses and where they can get the licenses. And if you open up the licenses, you could open it up to equality. You could stop the gentrification, and you could let meritocracy take place, really. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Justin. Appreciate that. Robert, who is next?
So next up is Ryan Lee, and then after Ryan will be Rep. Deborah Intinman.
All right. Ryan, go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Kathy. For the definition of social equity plan, I feel like some of the other comments we've already heard are going to bring up essentially the same issue. So in section J, subsection I, referring to ownership, must be at least 51% of the proposed retail business where applicants representing at least 51% of the ownership. And that's kind of the threshold, right? Which I understand is the baseline level of control. And maybe in there that way to allow for more, I guess, more potential financing or more people to fund access to these licenses or operational funding, things like that. But I feel like the 51% threshold leaves a lot of room for this process to be abused and to not actually get licenses in the hands of people that are the target for these licenses and the people who actually need to have them. So I feel like the threshold perhaps should, at least there should be consideration for raising that threshold of ownership, or even maybe like elsewhere in these rules discussing kind of financing options for the people who actually are granted these licenses and provide some maybe perhaps more leniency when it comes to financing and just allow for a higher percentage of the target demographic to actually have these licenses and have that control. 51% just seems very, very low. So I would just propose that perhaps be increased, but just something to consider.
Great, thank you very much, Ryan.
Thank you.
Appreciate the comment. All right, I believe Representative Entman, you were next in line, please.
Thank you. I have you have a statement called average state income. I've never seen that used in government. I think that there are terms that we could use to say what I think we want to say, which is about median income with qualifying factors, but average state income is not something that I've ever heard used. I'd really like us to use language that we typically use, and this is not it. And then if I am understanding what social equity in cannabis is supposed to be about, it is specifically about ensuring that African-American people, Black African-American people, have an opportunity to have licenses because they were left out of the original licensing plan. I don't understand why we're not using Black African-American in the language somewhere in this rulemaking if that is who we are supposed to be providing licenses for. It is my understanding, based on what the governor said, that there is no prohibition from using Black African-American, so I'm not understanding why we're not using it. These licenses are limited because in the past, Black African-American people were left out. So that is what the limit is about. When we first had the licensing, they were open to everyone, and no African-American people, or very few African-American people, were eligible. I want to make sure that we are remembering the history of why we are doing this along with this rulemaking. I'm not sure that everyone has been in on the history. And so that is why I'm reiterating that as we talk about what we hope to do in this rulemaking.
Thank you very much. Very, very much appreciated. All right, and I think, Robert, who is next? I see Emerald City Collective Gardens is on camera. Are you next? I don't know what your name is, sir.
They are.
Yes, good afternoon. Are you able to hear me clearly?
Yes, hear and see you, please.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, board members and everyone included, senators and representatives. My name is Micah Sherman with Emerald City Collective Gardens. We were the second Black-owned in Washington State in 2010. We were the first and only medical dispensary downtown Seattle, 2011. We unfortunately had to close down due to House Bill 5052, which was not a medical merger, but was actually a medical takeover. We at Emerald City Collective Gardens are pioneers, just like many other Black-owned collectives in Washington, as well as white and Mexican as well. With that being said, I want to give my condolences to the Jordan Brown family, the young man who was killed in Tacoma at a cannabis retail store. He was 29 years old. My condolences go out to his family and friends and to the place he worked at as well. 29 years old is way too young to die. My son will be 27 this October. That's very disheartening for me. I am deeply saddened by that. Been my son. And so with that being said, my question or comment is in regards to the disproportionately impacted area in section 2 here, B. I'm wondering, because there's kind of, for me, this confusion. As we're looking at this, are we talking about from years ago where there was Blacks in the CD and South End? Because as we all know, in the CD, Columbia City, that was heavily Black populated. So when we're talking about these areas, are we talking about now? Because Blacks, as has been stated, don't live in those areas right now. So I guess I'm just wondering, as we go forward, what is the full criteria? Is it from 20 years ago, or are we talking about from now? So that's pretty much my question for now, and I'll have more later. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Mr. Asai. Really appreciate that, and it sounds like there's some additional thinking we can do there on this definition. So greatly appreciate the feedback. Thank you for that. I see Board Member Garrett has her hand up, please.
I want to back up and address and ask a question of Representative Inman. So in order for us to do anything that's race-based, it has to come to us from the legislators. And I know that there was an attempt with a bill to get that done this session that didn't move. So without putting you on the spot, I guess my question becomes, are you willing to run a bill if that's what you feel like should be in here?
Well, I'm going to say a few things. And one, I want to clearly state that if a bill was needed, I would be willing to run the bill. But based on the information that I have and the declaration that the governor made and the equity and disparity reports that have been done, we have all the evidence we need to show that we can ask for these limited licenses to be set aside, put forth, whatever language you want to use, so that African American people can have the opportunity specifically to compete in the cannabis space. What we are trying to overcome is past injustice. We are not trying to create injustice moving into the future.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Board Member Garrett and Representative Inman. Any follow-up or no? Oh, no, I guess not. All right. We've got 2 more minutes. Robert, do we have any other folks who have raised hands?
So we have, I was about to say we had 3, but now we have 5. James Buchanan has had his hand up for a while. After James was Christy Stanley, and then Osaze Wilson. And then just recently, Peter Manning and Dale Sky Jones, but we're starting with James Buchanan.
Okay, so what I'm going to do here is so we can stay on our timeline, again, trying to stay on the agenda. If Mr. Buchanan, if you could speak for 1 minute, then we're going to stop at 2:05, take a brief break, and then come back. Others, please submit your comments in writing to the rules@lcb.wa so we can continue to move through the draft conceptual rules. So, Mr. Buchanan, please feel free.
Excuse me. Thank you. I agree 1,000% with Representative Intima. Definitely. Not only that, the governor has signed an executive order, but there was always case studies from the Attorney General that any state agencies can use race-based if there's no other way to determine. When you determine the harm was by race, then you can use that same measure to give out what's the contracts or whatever, or licenses based on race. And that was before the governor signed 9801. And since he signed that, it's state specific, but it's still spread out into the private sector. And the reason why it's taking so long is because they got to replace it with other language to show the state agencies on now what they can do, since that long time 30-year bondage has been released. So I urge the Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Board, stop trying to use the old language and the old mental way of not giving out equality. It's that simple. These licenses will not be in the hands and who they were designed to. And what the gentleman Ryan had said, 51%. No, this whole program and these rules are set up for all of these licenses to be manipulated. And a lot of people are listening on this call right now and on this Zoom call that are salivating at the mouth, waiting for this application process to come out. So, I don't stay on the right side and find a way to make sure they get in the hands to the folks that they're designed to be in the hands of. Thank you for this time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Buchanan. So again, we're going to stop and take a little bit of a break here. Let's do 5 minutes. If you could come back at 2:10, 2:11. I think 2:11 is 5 minutes. And others who we weren't able to call on, by all means, again, please submit your comments to rules@lcb.wa.gov. And then when we come back, we will begin discussing section 3. All right, thanks very much, everyone, and see you in about 5 minutes. All right, hoping everyone can gather back. And I hope that 5 minutes was enough time to grab some water or something else, but good to see everybody back. So I guess we'll go ahead and get started. Just want to make sure we have our rules coordinators back. We've got Caitlin back. Mr. Asai, if you could kindly, you can go off camera till we get to the next section if you're okay with that. It's great to see your face though. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Just wanted to share really quickly before we move into section 3, and that has to do with social equity applicant requirements. We are greatly appreciative of everything we're hearing and learning from you today. And truly, that's in the spirit of how we host these sessions and why we call them listen and learn sessions. We are truly listening and learning and hearing from you. We're not making any decisions today. I just wanted to share that right up front. We're here to gather your feedback and hear what you have to say, your reactions to these rules. So there may be some questions that you throw out that we're not able to answer at this point, but truly it's not because we're not at a place that we can truly answer those questions. So there may be things that you pose to us at questions that we'll take back to our internal work group and recognize that one of you offered up a question that we need to think about in terms of moving forward with these rules. So just kind of wanted to resituate the conversation and the dialogue moving forward, sort of with that thinking that, again, I go back to, we are truly here to listen and learn from you on how we can make these rules different or better, and your reactions to these rules and concept. So with that, and I just want to touch base with colleagues really quickly before I move into the next section. I'm seeing Justin nod. Any feedback, or Caitlin's nodding? Becky, good to go? Okay. All right. So I'd like to move into section 3. And again, inviting your responses about what you like, what you don't like, and what you might like to see differently in this section. So quickly, I'll just kind of give you a tour of the section if you haven't read it already. But this section outlines social equity applicant requirements. And so this kind of walks through going back to the 51% majority or controlling interest. So speaks to that really briefly. And then it lays out the 3 qualifications that we're looking for. So the first is that the applicant lived in a disproportionately impacted area in Washington for a minimum of 6 months, or the social equity applicant or a family member of the applicant's been arrested or convicted of a cannabis offense, or the social equity applicant's household income is less than the average state income. And so really that's just it's a brief section. I know that there might be some thoughts and ideas that folks would like to share with us about that. So we'll go ahead and start accepting those comments now. One thing I just want to remind folks, keeping an eye on the time, we'll stay in this section in section 3 until 2:35. And then again, if there are more comments folks want to offer, by all means, we'll look forward to seeing those in our rules inbox. So with that, Robert, who is signed up? And let's go ahead and start receiving those comments now.
So we have 6 hands up right now. The first 2, Peter Manning and Emerald City Collective Gardens, they were up previously. So I'm not sure if they're left over from section 2 or if they have comments to offer on section 3.
All right, we've got Mr. Asai's fingers up for 3. So Mr. Asai, please go ahead. Or I'm sorry, Mr. Manning, I think you were first, right?
I was gonna say, yeah, let Peter
right
go. Yeah.
And now just to be clear, now we have 9 hands up. just
Oh
to
my,
keep track
okay.
of time.
We'll have to keep those comments brief if possible, folks. Thanks. Oh, we lost you again.
Well, okay. Hey, thank you again for having me back. My concern is the wording of this this proposed the qualifications. Like, I'm concerned with the 6 months. You know, it was easy for someone because it stalled so long in the task force that anybody could have just been privy to that and just go set up shop in one of those disproportionate areas, and then they meet the qualifications. I agree with Mrs. Ittman, Representative Ittman, that we do need some type of representation when it comes to specifically getting to those people that were harmed. Me, for instance, I most definitely was beyond the qualified person to receive a license back in 2015. I met all the qualifications, but it was a whole bunch of hoopla behind me. It just was crazy. But it just wasn't with me, it was with damn near everybody Black. When it came to white people, I witnessed firsthand a white woman only owed $1 million in taxes and wound up with 3 stores. That is an insult to me. It's crazy. And I don't understand how, I know where we're at now. I know the LCB is trying to make these changes, but I think you guys really got to take a close look at those people that were knocking at the door before, that had the door shut on them for no justifiable reason. And now they're back here again. I think there's got to be a pathway for them. And they are those people that we should be looking at. They were qualified, they were Black, they lived in those disproportionate areas, which are now gentrified. That's all I have to say on that subject. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Manning. I appreciate it. All right, and I think Mr. Sai, yes, you were next. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you. And I fully agree with Representative Entenmann and as well as Peter Manning in what they're saying in regards to. I've been a part of the task force meetings from day one, even at the LCB community outreach meeting, and in all the meetings and the sub meetings, it's been talked about Black have been arrested the most for cannabis, and so that. Should be taken seriously as we move forward in the rulemaking. But here in Section 3, as Peter stated, the 6 months I disagree with. I really disagree with in the qualifications that only 2 need to be met. Okay, so Senate Bill 5052, Priority 1, you needed to have all 4. Well, it was retroactive, meaning I didn't apply and I didn't have a current retail, but we were licensed, we paid taxes, we were around in 2010, way before I even thought about going legal. We should have been grandfathered in and we weren't. So here we are now where someone can come in and the whole in Senate in SB 2870, it clearly talks about in page 1, section 2 about the arrest rates in cannabis. So whether you are yourself or a family member was arrested, that needs to be one of the main qualifications, because as it is set now with this meet at least 2, that means someone, a social equity applicant who was not affected by being arrested of cannabis or a family member, they can apply and they can get through. And I think the LCB needs to understand, like, the main part of 2870 was, one of the main parts was about arrest. And so if, for me, if you want to say 2 qualifications, okay, but there needs to be more points given for if someone meets all 3 qualifications, because someone that was not arrested themselves or a family member arrested for cannabis cannot supersede someone that was, or a family member that was. A social equity applicant, to me, needs to meet all 3 qualifications. And if they meet all 3 qualifications, they should get higher points. In regards to the 51%, it should be more points given for a social equity applicant owning a higher percentage. As it's been stated before, 51% could be highly manipulated. People are waiting to manipulate it. It needs not to be manipulated. Myself, Emerald City Collective Gardens, will be 100% Black owned, 100% social equity applicant. I advocate for myself and I advocate for others like me that want to be more than 51% owned, and they should get credit for that in moving forward. And so, and my other issue is in the LCB community forum in the meeting, it was, at first it was said the minimum of 10 years. Now we're down to 6 months. So I guess I'm just kind of confused on how we went from 10 years down to 6 months. And so that's it. I don't want to overtalk, so I'll let everyone speak. Thank you. You're muted.
Thank you. Somebody had to do it, right? Somebody has to do it in a meeting like this. Again, appreciate your comments very much and apologies for being muted there. Who might be next, Robert?
So, Kathy, if I can, just as an administrative issue here. So we have 7 people with their hands up. I would suggest basically drawing the line right now. And so if there's new hands come up, we're going to have to ask for that stuff in writing, but we'll try to get through those folks that currently have their hands up. And I see Mr. Buchanan as the last in that particular area. Does that sound reasonable?
Sure does, yeah. And then again, if we can keep comments fairly brief through here, that would be great, so we can stay on course here, stay on time. So who might be next?
So next up is Louis Flores. After Louis is Christy Stanley, and then Philip Petty.
All right, so is our next person unmuted?
Louis, can you unmute yourself?
There, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Yeah, thank you. My comments will be brief. I am brown. My grandfather was a Cuban. He was an African Cuban, but and I don't want to waste my time or anybody's time. And I'm currently 20% owner of a store in Vancouver. But I mean, I was arrested in 1987 for possession of 11 grams of Mexican dirt weed, basically. But that really affected me throughout my life because, you know, I would start working at a job, you know, and back in the 80s and 90s, they didn't have what, you know, the resources they have now. Long story short, about 4 to 6 weeks after I would start a job, they will look at my arrest record and, you know, and there I'd be out of a job again. But I mean, again, I don't want to waste anybody's time, but is there an opportunity in this program for somebody like me? That's my question.
So I think hear what you're saying. I'm going to reach out to the colleagues here. I think what we're talking about is how opportunities can be made available by these rules. And at this point, we're just looking at draft conceptual rules, right? So I think I'm hearing what you're saying, and I'm hearing that this this is a and we're thinking about how we might move through these rules. Just reaching out to others. Or anything, Becky, Justin, Caitlin, you'd like to Mr. Flores?
So I guess what I would offer, again, you know, we can't provide any definitive answers today, but one of the things that we did in the fall, over the summer and the fall, was amend our criminal history record requirements so that folks in similar situations would be able to qualify, whereas before they may not have. And so we have made some strides in that particular area. So hopefully that modification, which we're not actually talking about today, will help in those types of situations.
All right. Well, I'll just keep trying until someone says no. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments today, and thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Right.
Thank you. Who's next?
So up next is Christy Stanley. After Christy would be Philip Petty and then Micah Sherman.
Hello, my name is Christy. I'm from North Kitsap. I just have been listening and making a couple of notes and observations in response to Ryan in section, the section about the applicant being 51%. 51% is controlling majority in any business entity. So to state in writing anything more than that is a redundancy. I don't know, maybe that's just the way I read it, but I know that 51% is a controlling majority and usually has the say-so of directing the control of that business. And as in response to Representative Entenman, I'm pretty sure if I remember reading the language correctly, it did say people of color. And now moving on to the requirements, whereby someone is suggesting that the qualification for living 6 months, I see that more as an advantage for the simple fact that there's going to be more than one disproportionately impacted area in Washington state. And having been a low income person myself for many, many years, I didn't always live in the same impacted area for very long. And so I'm not sure that that's necessarily something that would benefit an applicant in the way that they think it might. So I would urge people to really think about that a little bit more. As far as, there was one other comment. Household income, qualification 3, but I think that's been addressed already in a previous comment through the DIA report that the University of Washington is going to be putting out. Oh, that's what I wanted to know. How far back are they going to be looking at the qualifying income? Is it going to be 3 tax years? Is it going to be, do you know? I think that would matter.
Yeah, I think it's at least 20 years, but I'd have to go back and check.
20 years? Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christy. Who might be next?
So up next after Christy is Philip, and then after Philip is Micah Sherman and Daryl Powell.
Okay, and we have all of 5 minutes left, so so that everyone can speak. If you can keep your comments very short, very brief through here, very, very helpful. So, Mr. Petty.
Okay. Hi. You can hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Real quick. So I just real quick wanted to address, if you're a Black or brown applicant, a social equity plan seems like nonsense. I mean, because this is what we are, the social equity. Secondly, in terms of how long you lived in the area, most of the places around the other parts of the country, it's at least 5 years. And you can move around, live in a different residence and still be in the same impacted area. The point is that you lived in the area. The other thing I just wanted to address, the pioneers on this deal. You know, a pioneer isn't a guy who had a card table with 4 jars of weed on the table. A pioneer is a guy who, way back before there was medical marijuana and people were getting arrested, they were selling weed out of their pocket, you know, on corners, at homes, etc. Those are the pioneers. They're pioneers too, right? And so I'm not trying to get into who should get it, because we originally had a portal that when we created the bill 1827, which were the task force recommendations, the real ones, they addressed 3 things: how many licenses you could get per year. Secondly, they address capitalization, which is the main thing that hurts businesses. And that was also in it because we can get it out of the money that is the community investment money that we just recently got. And thirdly, where are you going to put the stores? So we're going to have to reduce restrictions. And there was language on making those licenses that are currently, that we're talking about right now, mobile. So there was a portal that would address everyone, the gentleman who's brown, the gentlemen who are the medical marijuana guys. There was a portal for all of you to get into. You just had to qualify. So I don't know why you get specific treatment because of that there was a portal, and that's what we need to go back to. That bill, and Representative Edmond, you were right on the money. The bill that we had, and unfortunately we didn't get a chance to meet with you, was the bill that was the perfect solution for what we're trying to fix right now. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Petty. We only have time for one more comment, so who might be next, Robert?
Well, so we had the cutoff from what Justin had said, but the next one in the order is Micah Sherman. The other is Micah Sherman.
Okay. So go ahead, Micah, and we'll move to the next section at 2:35. Go ahead.
Mike, are you able to unmute yourself? Okay, I'm going to elevate him real quick.
Okay.
There you go. Thank you. My name is Micah Sherman, and I'm a licensee appointed member of the Social Equity Task Force, and have, as the co-chair of the licensing work group, spent a lot of time thinking about and hearing about this particular issue. I want to reiterate what a lot of comments have made thus far, that because of the limited number of these licenses and the previous rulings from the Attorney General, specifically Attorney General opinion from 2017 titled number 2, which talks about this issue of race and in contracting, our work in the licensing task force and the licensing work group has definitely led us to the conclusion that the policies that got us into this situation, the war on drugs and specifically cannabis rates, was an explicitly racially informed project. And as a result, it's our conclusion in the work group that we need a race-conscious solution to combat that, and that solution that doesn't include a race-conscious component is not going to allow this very limited number of licenses, which are going to ultimately go to a lottery, to make sure that they go to the people that were most harmed statistically by this previous war on drugs. So I don't see how these qualifications are going to produce a list of people that can go into a lottery and come out with us having any hope of the Black and brown people that were explicitly targeted by that arrest program are going to end up with these licenses because of the nature of the way those populations are distributed in our state. It's not an adequate framework to get to the proper result. And I do think that there's pretty clear legal authority to take a race-conscious approach here, and I'd really like to see that added to the qualifications.
All right, thank you, Micah. Appreciate that. So for others who are waiting to speak again, if you could kindly submit your comments to rules at lcb.wa.gov. We're going to move on to section 4 now, the social equity application process. We were supposed to start that section at 2:35. We're just running a couple minutes late now, so doing a little bit better on time. But I will briefly walk through this section. And again, this really does go through the process. I'm not going to read every piece out loud, so we have enough time for folks to comment. But
Kathy.
Oh, go ahead, Ollie. Yes.
I just want to go back to the announcement that Justin made. We were not supposed to end this until after I think it's Representative Inman, Darrell Powell, James Buchanan. It was supposed to, we announced that it would end after those folks who had their hands raised before spoke.
Okay.
Yeah.
Apologies. That's the challenge of
But
writing.
still back, keep it maybe 1 minute, but we did state that.
Okay, my apologies, everyone. So let's go back. All right, so if we could just keep comments at 1 minute apiece, that would be very helpful. So who is next? I do apologize.
So based on the announcement, there would be 3 people remaining. I know there's 8 hands in the queue, but of those 8, the 3 remaining from before would be Darrell Powell, and then Rep. Intinman and James Buchanan, in that order.
Great, thank you. So I think Mr. Powell, you were going to go next, correct?
Yes, thank you, Board Member Garrett, for advocating for me to have a voice in this section. I participated in the Liquor Cannabis Board work groups for over 6, 7, 8 months now. And the point I want to make is when the Liquor Cannabis Board says we accepted the recommendations other than race-based, there needs to be an explanation to understand that. You know, who's making that determination and to the why. It's not illegal. It's not subject to Attorney General concerns. And so there's some reason why that's being made. We came up with a rubric that we thought was fair and addressed all the issues in the work group, and it was not accepted. This 51% is a ploy, and this lottery is a ploy to me. The last lottery turned out 560 licenses that are currently in the state of Washington. 480 are active and produced over $1.5 billion in revenue the last fiscal year. How many of them were social equity applicants? And so we're twisting in the wind for 38 licenses like this is the first 38. This is after 560 licenses. And if these rules aren't written such that African Americans and Black and other BIPOC communities are first in line to get these applications, that the rubric and scoring system is to ensure that they begin to participate in this cannabis fabric, anything short of that is unfair. And so you can't keep using the term social equity, but there's no equity being produced out of the terminology. So I encourage you to go back and look at this application process when you talk about 51%, a social equity plan. Those are all barriers for African Americans and other BIPOC communities. So I have a problem with the section as written. We have a rubric from which you can go back and evaluate. But to summarily say the Cannabis Board says we're taking everything other than race, there's something that's inherently unfair about that process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Powell. And again, apologies for jumping ahead there. Appreciate your comment very much. All right, we had 2 more people, I believe. I believe Rep. Intiman was one. Yes, please.
Thank you. I wanted to ask about this requirement that a person be low income. Am I understanding your application process correctly? That a person who is not low income would not be considered for one of these licenses? If I'm African American, lived in an impacted area, but I am not low income, that takes me out of the running? Please explain. Or maybe I'm not understanding the documentation correctly. I don't think you have to be low income to qualify for a license. Is that what you're saying?
So turning to Caitlin or Becky for a response.
So you are correct. You don't have to meet all 3 qualifications, so you wouldn't have to be low income to qualify. Sorry, I'm getting that go. You would have to meet 2 of the 3.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Thank you. All right, and we had 1 more person, I believe.
Is it my turn? Jim Buchanan.
Yes, Ms. Buchanan, please.
Well, thank you, Board Member Garrett, for advocating for us to be able to speak. I think we're kind of hearing everything. It's kind of redundant. The bottom line is that the task force did their job on recommending the proper rubric and the application process. And since then, this whole process that's being presented to us today is absolutely horrible and unacceptable. So, I'm gonna keep it simple. We would ask you to kind of reboot and go back and look at the recommendations that were sent in, that main recommendation that was sent in by the task force. All the other recommendations were in the bill, and the bill didn't go through. It wasn't supported fully, by a lot of folks that it should have been. However, we're here now, still trying to give out the licenses from 2870 over 2 years later. So the rubric is legal. It doesn't have to go through legislation. There's nothing about the rubric that the task force recommended that has to go through legislation. The only problem is the LCB not wanting to do it because it says race-based. And we have a lot of people that are on the sidelines waiting for that to happen so they can get the licenses and take them, and they'll be in the wrong hands. We're at the fork in the road right now. Which way are you going to go? That's going to determine what's going to happen in the next 2 or 3 years. But the race-based rubric, based on the state statistics that determine how licenses and how people qualify, is what the task force recommended, and that's how the licenses need to be determined, how they're given out. So, as Daryl said, we urge you just to go back to that, and do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Buchanan. All right, are we okay to move forward now? Okay. Again, my sincere apologies. I think when Justin was sharing, I was taking notes. I'd like to move on to section 4 then, if we may. And again, just kind of go back to where I started to introduce this piece of the draft conceptual rules that walks us through the social equity application process. And again, I'll just do a brief overview and then invite comments. So looking forward to that as well. So we describe the application window and do set out a 30 calendar day application window, and then move into the initial requirements. So here we're speaking about where the social equity licensee, or I'm sorry, applicant would need to apply with a business licensing service. There are some other requirements as well, asking that folks only apply in one jurisdiction at a time, not change that selected jurisdiction once the application has been completed. And then the board will provide a list of jurisdictions that are available on its website once, on a regular basis, so folks know where they can apply. Then, and I think Caitlin walked through this process a little at the beginning of our session, then those applications would be forwarded to the social equity contractor for review. We set out that process here. I'm going to scroll all the way down, and then the board takes a look at the social equity applicants that have been scored highest by the social equity contractor within the jurisdiction selected, and those will be processed by the board. And then here's the process for the double-blind lottery if necessary. Also process for preliminary letter approval. So I know that was real brief, but a lot of content there. Hope that folks have had an opportunity to take a look at that prior to our meeting today. But we'll go ahead and open this section up for review now as well. And again, I do believe we're going to run a little over today, but I'd like to give the full half an hour so we can hear from as many folks as possible on this section. So Robert, turning to you, how many hands do we see raised?
Can we pause just real quick for just an admin adjustment? So we have 8 hands up. Now we have 9 hands up. But of those 9, the first 5 were raised during section 3. I just want to make sure those folks, those first 5 hands are being raised for section 4 and not section 3. And if they're not, if folks would just lower their hands, and we'll start with those that raise their hands up for section 4. Okay, so I saw one hand go down.
If I could jump in. So
sure.
We've heard a number of comments that are supportive of one another, and that's great. If you do have comments that you would like to support previous comments that we've heard today, I think it would be very effective if those could be put in writing and sent to us to say, yeah, we agree with these comments. And then that way it'll leave room for us getting to these new sections in the new language to get that more broad based perspective. So if folks are willing to do that, that would be much appreciated, so we can try to get through all of the rules today.
Thank you, Justin. All right, Robert, who might we start with?
So, again, I don't know if you want to start with the first hands that came up in section 4 or those that were still up from section 3.
Why don't we start with the first, the hands that newly rose for section 4? How about that?
Okay, so let me call out the 4 from section 3 that were still there, so they know we're not ignoring them. They're still captured. It was Letitia Ellery, Teddy, Alexis Gobeski, and Peter Manning. From that, I'm going to start with Emerald City Collective Gardens, and then after that is Rep. Deborah Entenman, and then Osaze Wilson.
All right, thank you. So, Mr. Asai, please.
Oh, yes, thank you. Just real briefly, a definition of a pioneer: noun, a person who was among the first to explore or settle a new country or area. Verb, to develop or be the first to use or apply a new method, area of knowledge, or activity. Emerald City Collective Gardens was this. Game Collective was this. Life Tree Collective was this. Bella Soleil was this. We are pioneers. In section 4, I question in regards to, and then I'm sorry, just briefly, the reason we're here, ladies and gentlemen, we're here because of people like Paula Sardinas, Peter Manning, former Representative Pettigrew, Ollie Garrett. Ollie Garrett came on board in 2016. Ollie Garrett saw what happened with 5052 and I-502 and how Blacks and Brown were X'd out of being in this business. So for those who are new to this, we're here because of their fight. Paula Sardinas, Peter Manning, Aaron Barfield, also with the help of Governor Inslee, Ollie Garrett. And I want to give them the praise because they're the pioneers who got us here at 2870. And I want that to be stated, and I will always speak the truth on that. In section 4, the application window, I have a question. It says the board will open the application window for 30 days. My question is, how long after that will the application get to the LCB? And that was it for section 4. Thank you.
Thank you. Caitlin or Becky?
Sure, I can answer that. So when an applicant applies with business licensing services, it's directly sent to the Liquor and Cannabis Board. So it's within a matter of a few days that we actually receive the application.
Thank you, Caitlin. All right, who is next?
So up next is Rep. Deborah Entenman after, go ahead.
Thank you. I have a question specifically about the oversight of the applications. Is the group who is reviewing the application a part of the Liquor and Cannabis Board? Are they independent? If they are independent, do they have to declare that they will not benefit from any of the licenses being granted?
So, Representative, they are an independent. We will be putting out a RFP, so looking for a contractor sometime in late April. But they will have to be independent of being a licensee or anyone involved with the licensee or an applicant.
But will they have to declare that they won't benefit from any of the licenses being granted?
Correct.
This is a specific question.
No, that is correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Enneman. Who's next?
So it was Osaze Wilson, but Osaze just lowered their hand. If that was intentional, we'll move on to Micah Sherman was next after Osaze.
All right, please, Micah.
I'm going to elevate Micah again. I think he had problems with. Yep.
Yeah,
there we go. Thanks. So my comment is about the social equity contractor review in subsection V, subsection 5. It references that the social equity contractor will score social equity applications using the scoring rubric (parentheses social equity plan) provided by the board. So I read through this document and see it that there's 3 qualifications. You meet 2 of them to be eligible, but it's unclear to me what the scoring will be and how a particular applicant would be prioritized independently of the minimum requirements. So I'm curious what that exactly means and where it's outlined.
So I can answer that, Kathy.
Yes, please. Thank you, Caitlin.
So it's required in statute that an applicant submit a social equity plan. So that's something that the contractor will be reviewing, and the contractor will be using the scoring rubric provided by the board to prioritize and score the applicants. With the social equity plan, our goal is to work on something that we can provide with the contractor so that it's not another barrier to entry for folks and not an additional requirement, but it is something in statute that they must do.
But is it outlined what the actual scoring qualifications would be? Is there a rubric that's been circulated, or is that still being developed?
Yep, we shared our draft scoring rubric with the Social Equity and Cannabis Task Force, I believe back in January, I want to say, and it's also posted on our website.
Okay, so it's that most recently circulated one. Okay, thanks.
Great, thank you, Micah. Who's next?
So up next we have Tony Motley, and then after Tony we'll circle back up to Letitia Ellery, and then Peter Manning, and then James Buchanan. So Tony Motley's up next.
All right.
Hey, thanks for the time. I appreciate all the voices on here. I'm still learning myself, so appreciate those who have come before me and raised these concerns. I think my only feedback would be, I like what everybody's saying. I think it was Mr. Norton who said it. If anybody agrees with somebody to write that in, is there a reason, and maybe it's just on my application, but is there a reason why we can't add the comments in here? So we could just like +1 a comment, and we could have if everybody agrees with what somebody's saying, +1 to that, and that will just bubble it up. Is there a reason why the comments are disabled? I'm not sure if that's just me. I think it would also help to have it enabled so that way you could just drop some of the links that you're referring to in the discussion.
All right, we'll remember that for the next listen and learn session. Sir, we really appreciate the feedback. Thank you very much. In the meantime, though, if you do want to submit a comment, don't hesitate to send us an email. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Robert, if I remember right, and I think I wrote it down fast enough, Letitia might be next. Is that correct?
Letitia Ellery I have up next, yes.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I just wanted to know why it's being implied that this opportunity is just for African Americans. And then I also wanted to know if the scoring criteria rubric is still in place. And then as far as the scoring rubric, they have race points involved in that scoring rubric. And why are we being divided by race on a point scale? Because like African Americans get more points than, say, a Native American or a Hispanic person gets. But if this is a social equality opportunity, why don't we all get the same amount of points across the board for being a person of a different race?
All great questions, I hope I'm saying your name correctly, Letitia, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think the rubric that LCB suggested did not consider race. And I think there were other elements of your question. We're reaching out to colleagues, Caitlin or Becky, other elements of Letitia's concerns that we can address now. I just want to make sure we're answering questions. Okay. So I was trying to write down your questions as quickly as I could, Letitia, but.
Kathy, I believe you answered the question.
Okay. Were there any other?
But is this opportunity only being applied to African Americans? Because from what I've gathered so far from the comments, because I tuned in to learn about the process of this and how to take advantage of this opportunity, and I feel like very few questions have been asked as far as the process. Like that's more seems like a debate on like which race is going to be able to qualify for this.
I hear what you're saying now and appreciate that feedback. And again, these are just draft conceptual draft rules at this point. And we're taking feedback from folks on these conceptual draft rules at this point. So this is LCB's thinking in terms of how to create a social equity program, and these rules frame that. And they, again, we're not making any decisions today. We're just receiving feedback from you and from others about the content of what these rules offer at this point. So to your question, the decision, a lot of decisions haven't been made yet. We're just receiving feedback. And we appreciate yours as part of that. And we'll consider it when we meet internally to talk through the feedback we've received today. Does that help, Letitia?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. All right. And I think who might be next, Robert? I think I wrote down the name too quickly and I cannot read my own writing. Apologies.
That's okay. Up next we have Peter Manning, and then James Buchanan, and then after that would be Alexis Kobeski.
Okay, so Mr. Manning, please.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I just saw you call. All right.
You're on mute.
You're on mute, sir.
I'd like to give clarity to everyone that has a concern about the race-based issue of this whole thing. In 2014, when this thing was being drafted, it was being processed, I spoke with David Corva, who actually worked with the LCB to make the formula for the I-502. He expressed at one of the meetings that the way it was based, that Blacks and Latinos would suffer the most, they wouldn't be qualified, or the way it was structured. I took up the fight then. I carried that fight for a while by myself, and then I was joined by Aaron Barfield. We formed Black Excellence in Cannabis. We later teamed up with Paula Sardinas to address the issues of Black and brown people being excluded. We actually met with Paula Sardinas actually met with the LCB, and they drafted up some type of thing that which we know now was HB 2870. I, along with Aaron Barfield, Paula Sardinas, actually wrote language that was included in that bill. My point I would like to make to everybody is, I understand you guys' concerns about this thing seems like it's being crafted for Black people, but you have to understand the impact that Black people suffered at the hands of white people when it came to cannabis. We could smoke a joint on our porch and a cop show up, he had the right to search our entire house and get whatever evidence he wanted to go for it and put us in jail. The point I'm trying to make here, we were most definitely, without unequivocally, hammered and decimated our families and lost family members to jails and prisons, lost places to live, lost contact with children behind the war on drugs. That war on drugs actually decimated my community so much and built up the white community. This pathway that we're going now, you guys all have to understand the pathway we are trying to make amends for what has happened. I appreciate all you guys' concern about who's going to benefit from it. But what you need to do is ask your question, why haven't the people that were hurt the most benefited from it yet? That's what we need to focus on. I hear your concern, lady, that just spoke, but you need to understand that we are the victims. And I'm sick of us being Black people going out saying, hey, we were victimized. And then all of a sudden, when we get recognition, we have 50 other victims that don't even look like us. If you felt that way, you should have been crying like we were crying. That's just my point. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I need to interject because, you know, we want to respect the feedback of everybody, and everybody's being respectful today. So I really appreciate that. But, you know, we can all agree to disagree on different things, but we do want to allow folks to express their opinions as well. So I appreciate the interest in commenting. Obviously, we want to make sure that if you agree with somebody that we're tracking some of that, but if you disagree, you can certainly say I disagree with that comment and explain why, but let's not go after.
Okay, right. I understand. I apologize, but it still stands. It's a sensitive subject with me because I witnessed firsthand. I was there. You know, I had glaucoma. I got caught with like an eighth of weed. I had to do 6 months in jail. That's just crazy, man. And that was in 1990. I'm just telling you, man. It's just we were really the victims of that war on drugs. I don't care. Nobody went through what we went through, man. You guys weren't parked 8-9 months from your family because of a plant. Now the plant's legal, and you guys got these white shops in Black neighborhoods, and it hurts to go out there. I live in Skyway, right by Havahart. The park lot is filled with my people buying weed. We don't benefit. We're only allowed to consume. And now we're telling you guys that we want an opportunity to produce, to process. We want in on this generational wealth for our kids, and everyone else is coming on board talking about, hey, I'm a victim too. No, the true victim is the person laying in the hospital with the bullet holes in them from the war on drugs. Those are the true victims. I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you for your time.
You know, I appreciate those comments, Peter. And I'm not taking away from those comments, just to remind folks, you know, we're not trying to debate the atrocities of the past. We just want to be able to figure out how do we construct this as the best path forward for us. And I think, you know, we're looking at all of those comments moving in that direction. So I could totally respect and appreciate the perspective that you're offering on that. And I think we do acknowledge the issues that have come up, and we just want to make sure that we're focusing on this rule language so we can be as productive as we can today. Thank you.
You're muted.
Thank you very much. I think we had Mr. Buchanan next, and then Alexis after that, and then we can move on to the next section. That would be section 5. So please, Mr. Buchanan, anything about the rule that you'd like to offer?
And you know, yeah, there is about the rule, but I've got other statements that I need to say too. Justin, at the end of the day, the lady before Peter addressed her concerns about folks, you know, expressing their opinion, and she expressed hers. So Peter should be allowed to express his as well. You didn't stop her. So why did you stop him to correct him? I want to say that to simply, this is my time now, please, you know, to simply look at and say we're going to look at this rule and say how we can change the rule and not even get in conversation on what happened before is unrealistic, literally. You know, as we see, the rule is ridiculous. You already had what it should be, and you guys don't want to do it. So this, to us, this is just a process you want to go through. How many of these things that we're saying as a community of concern are literally going to be changed today because we're saying it? Probably none. because your intent is not to do it. And that's the bottom line. So to get specifically on this though, let's talk about a social equity plan. The social equity is here because it wasn't equal. So how are you asking the recipients of a social equity licenses or one that wants to ones that want to apply to tell you how they're going to be equitable? I mean, that's your job to tell us how you're going to be equitable, not to write a equity plan on how we, the ones that have been harmed, are supposed to be equitable. That is ridiculous to even ask for that to be in the plan, or to have to give points on, show us how you're going to go in the community and be equitable yourselves, when we were the ones that didn't receive equity and are trying to receive equity. That shouldn't be in there at all. It should be a business plan. Say, how are you going to do business? Not how are you going to be equitable? So for folks to get together and literally come up with that is absolutely fascinating. The rubric is there on what really needs to happen. You know what? So we need to look at the facts of really why you're here. You're here for equity for the ones that have been harmed, where equity did not exist, and make sure everything around this is boxed around that concept. Thank you for giving me the time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Buchanan. Appreciate that. I'd also like to, I think we have Alexis last, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct, Robert?
After Alexis, there were two other hands that have come up. While Emerald City Collective Gardens and Susan Stoltzfus, and now, as I'm speaking, another hand. I'm not sure what you wanted to do with respect to cutoff time or anything like that. So after Jim was Alexis Kobeski, and then three more hands.
Okay, go ahead, Becky, please.
Kathy, I just wanted to address something that Mr. Buchanan had spoken about, because the social equity plan isn't something that the Liquor and Cannabis Board had the authority to remove. It's actually required by law. And I think that Caitlin spoke about that. As far as the scoring rubric, that's why we're here. And in good faith, is to listen to what the community has to say about the rules that we're putting forward. If it doesn't make sense, that's what we want to hear. That, you know, that give us a chance to make good on the information we're hearing back. We purposely reached out to wide. We did put a wide net out there so everyone in the communities of color could have a, you know, could listen in, could have a say to provide input. And so I'm, you know, that absolutely thrilled that we have so many people on this phone call telling their stories, sharing their concerns. And I, you know, that I just want to go back to the things that we can look at changing. That's why we're here, to hear from folks, so we can make those changes and look at what that looks like. But for those things that are in law that we're required to do, we won't be able to pull out. That's why we're not giving points for a social equity plan, but looking at how to determine, you know, that what that plan looks like without making a lot of requests by the applicants that end up applying for these social equity licenses.
Well,
Thank you.
I sincerely hope that there's change that comes from this meeting. Thank you for that information.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Buchanan. So, Robert, I'd like to check with you again, because I simply am not writing down names fast enough, and I think hands are going up, and I'd like to take what other, you said 6 hands came up?
There are 5, including Jim Buchanan's hand.
Right,
after him is Alexis Kobeski, and after Alexis, there are 3 additional hands that just recently popped up. Thank you, Mr. Buchanan. So after Alexis, it's Emerald City Collective Gardens, Susan Stoltzfus, and Jeff Merriman.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is Alexis, Mr. Asai, Susan, and then remind me of the last person, Robert. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. The last person is Jeff Merriman.
Jeff Merriman. So let's take those last 4 to comment on section 4, and then we'll move to section 5. And if folks could keep comments to roughly 1 or 2 minutes, it would be greatly appreciated. So please, Alexis, if you would unmute, we'd love to hear from you.
I'm gonna go ahead and elevate Alexis real quick.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. My comments are, my name is Alexis Gobeski. I'm with Dynamic Law Group, and my comments are specifically regarding subsection 5 of section 4. And regarding the social equity plan that's in parentheses, I think that that is very oddly placed and may lead to it's poor drafting. And so if we move that so that it reads, the social equity contractor will score social equity applications, including their social equity plan, using the scoring rubric provided by the board, it will make more sense. Also, and I may be in this portion echoing Mr. Sherman's input, but the scoring rubric, I believe, should really be placed into the set of rules as opposed to a separate document, so that it can't be modified later. Everybody knows exactly what the scoring rubric will entail. And, and it wouldn't be unusual for the LCB to do that in the priorities when we had the priority 1 through 3 for retails. All of the requirements for each priority were put into the rules. And so I think it would make a lot of clarification to put them in here as well. That's all.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, let me go back to my list here. All right, so Alexis, next, Mr. Asai.
Yes, thank you. My first question is, which rubric is the LCB currently wanting to use or drafting? Because I know there's been several different years. I know about the task force rubric, but I'm wondering which of the because LCB had 3 different versions, so I'm just wondering which version right now are they going by? And in section 4, I do want to give some points of things that I'm okay with as far as section 4I. I'm okay with section 4 and A. The social equity applicant, whether applying as a person or entity, may apply for cannabis license once during the application window described. I'm okay with address not being required. One thing that's a little confusing for me is the social equity. This is in section 4C. The social equity applicant may only apply for one jurisdiction during the application window. And then in D, it says a social equity applicant may not change their selected jurisdiction after initial application. I guess I just need some more clarification on that from the LCB. That's it. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Caitlin?
So Kathy, I can provide some clarification on the jurisdictions. So
Appreciate
due
that.
to the limited number of available licenses for the program, when the applicant applies with business licensing, they must select the jurisdiction that they wish to operate. So, Mr. Asai, you're right, you don't have to have a location address, but you do have to have that jurisdiction. And what we're looking at now, which we'll see later on in the rules, is looking at putting that at counties rather than all the way down to the city level. So it would potentially select the county that you wish to operate in when you apply, and you can only apply one time. Does that help answer those questions?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
And then the rubric, which rubric is the LCB using?
So we are using the rubric that we shared with the task force in January. I'm trying to find the link on the website here, but I'll make sure I can, I'll have to find that. I'm searching for it on the site now. It used to be on the task force website as well. So I think there's been some things that have moved around, but I'll make sure that gets corrected right away.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Asai. Next, I'd like to move on to Susan, please.
Hi, I'm sorry. I realize my comment is on section 5.
Okay.
So willing to wait.
We're almost there. We are almost there. Thank you very much, Susan. Moving on to Mr. Merriman. Jeff Merriman, please.
So Jeff has lowered his hand.
Already, so I put my hand down.
Okay.
The strategic engagement exercise.
Thank you very much. All right, and I see Representative Entman, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to have some clarification. And so I might have misunderstood. Are you saying that entity that receives a social equity license must have a social equity plan? And is that something you require of every licensee, or is this just for the special licensees?
Go ahead, Caitlin.
So in law, a social equity applicant is required to submit a social equity plan. It's not required for other licenses that we have issued before. It's something that our legislators put in law for specific for the social equity program.
Do we know why? Why specifically for the licensee who is benefiting from a social equity plan, but not for the larger entities that are established and making money? A social equity plan takes time and investment. I just think that it's an unfair requirement for a group who has had the least opportunity to open up a store or facility, and you're not requiring it for everyone. It just seems unfair.
I appreciate those comments very much.
And Representative, we don't disagree with you at all with that. And really what we're looking for is how can we connect with commerce and how can we simplify this social equity plan so it's not an additional thing that another special thing someone has to do. And, you know, we understand that it could get very difficult, but that's certainly not our goal with the social equity plan, and we recognize that.
Thank you. I just think that it should be required for everyone or no one. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. All right, are we at a point that we can move on to section 5? Robert, do we have any additional hands?
We have one hand from Susan, who's already said that she is.
She's waiting for section 5.
For section 5, that's right.
That's right. Okay. All right. So with that, we will move on to section 5. And Susan, if I may, I'm just going to take a moment to go through the additional provisions, and then we'll welcome your comments. So here, we just move into some of the recommendations. I'm sorry, from the Social Equity Task Force. No time restrictions, pardon me, for a social equity applicant to select and secure a location. A requirement that applicants don't make any ownership changes once the application's been submitted. Social equity licenses that are currently designated to specific cities may be located anywhere within the county. So offering movement to the extent that we can by law at this point. Also, just a subsection that provides that qualifying for the social equity program doesn't necessarily mean that the social equity applicant will meet the licensing qualifications that exist in current LCB rule in chapter 314.55. And then an allowance that our provision that licenses awarded under the section cannot be transferred within the first year of the license being issued. And so I will go ahead and let's go ahead and start with Susan and then Robert. So hopefully I can keep track and do better at keeping track. Can you tell me who we have in line? And I'll just take that down right now. I know we've got Susan. Who else?
Right. So we have 6 hands as of right now, and I'll just run through them real quick. After Susan is Christy Stanley, then Jeff Merriman, then Micah Sherman, James Buchanan, and then Emerald City Collective Gardens.
Okay. So we've got 6 folks. I think we might stay on track here, which is great. So let's go ahead and start with Susan, please. We welcome your comments.
Thank you. Just 2 comments about number 3 there in section 5. So I think you kind of just referred to that. There might be a point of clarification that the license could be moved anywhere within the county where not prohibited by local government, only because we know there are some in, I think, every county that prohibits establishments of cannabis business. And then I'm just wondering, is the limit on the total number of licenses per city, is this on top of that? So you're lifting the number, or is it capped? So for example, again, a city like Seattle has already reached the cap. And would these add to the number of licenses in the city?
So we would not be adding any licenses. This program is specific in law that it's for licenses that have been discontinued, canceled, or revoked. So right now that we're looking at about 40 licenses, and it would not be increasing any of those caps. It's those licenses that have maybe already been issued and had since been canceled, revoked, discontinued.
That helps, Susan. I hope so.
Thank you.
If I can, if I heard you right, Susan, I think you were asking about the city caps that we currently have. So let's just say, city A is allowed to have 20, they have 20. I think your question is one of these licenses that's available, can it go into that area that already has 20? Is that what I heard?
Or would this raise it to 21?
Okay. I don't know if that makes any difference to our answer from our licensing team.
Yes, thanks, Justin, for that clarity. They could go, so in that example, then yes, they could go into a city that it's already reached their cap. They can go anywhere in the county. There's no other restrictions.
All right, thank you for that, Caitlin and Justin. All right, I'd like to move on next, Christy.
Hello again, Christy Stanley, North Kitsap. My question kind of was answered somewhat in the last commenter's questioning. My question has more to do with those cities that are currently banned, or those cities who currently have an allotment but don't want to utilize that allotment. Will an applicant be allowed to, let me just ask straight up, you're not using marijuana certificate holders, licenses, number one. And number two, you're going to allow a licensee to attempt to get a license in a banned city, possibly, or should they just defer automatically to that county and bypass the city altogether, knowing that that city or that jurisdiction has a ban?
So the draft that we have, I'm sorry. So the draft as we have it written now is they could go anywhere within the county. We wouldn't, we don't hold up licenses if there's a current ban or moratorium. That's the applicants or business owners' decision if they want to get licensed there. It's not something that that's not something that we have written in our draft rules.
And to the first question, these 34 allotments are not part of the certificate holders pool, correct?
Correct. These are licenses that have been discontinued, canceled, revoked. They are not title certificate holders licenses.
Do these potential 34 licenses need to stay within their original jurisdictions for which they were lost or forfeited?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, thank you, Christy, and thank you, Caitlin. Next up, Jeff Merriman.
Yes, this has to go with kind of the last part too. Having to fill out a form, a social equity type essay or whatever. As a person in the industry, I think that's great because we all know we had a 30-day window to get in, and the fact that we're allowing people in now, I don't think is fair as being in the industry, but I mean, so be it. I think it'd be a good thing for the industry to have those licenses reactivated. And if it takes someone having to fill out a social equity type form, I think that's very good. And I'm sorry, it's not like what we had to do several years ago, but we were pioneers in the industry, and it was very unfortunate that not everyone could get in. I know several people got in that were felons with no money, and they seem to make it grassroots effort. So to be handed an opportunity like this, an essay is nothing. That's all I have to say.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate the feedback. Next up, Micah Sherman, please. I think we had to elevate Micah last time so we could hear him, right?
That's correct. And I was doing it right now. Micah should be able to go.
Hi, yeah, thanks. So my question is also about the jurisdiction point. So right now, for example, there's 4 Klickitat County licenses that are in the pool. Would this allow those licenses, which are currently in a county that has a ban, would they be able to cite themselves within a city in Klickitat County that allowed them to be there?
Yes.
So this could potentially increase the number that is available to this program from the estimated 17 to a potentially larger pool as a result of that?
I'm not sure where 17 is coming from.
In the LCB's presentation to us in the licensing work group in August of 2020, that was the estimated number of these 38 licenses that were in jurisdictions that would be eligible to be issued.
Okay, yeah, so we did have, I think at that time, 17 allotments that were designated to cities that were in bans or moratoria. So this is our approach to provide more flexibility so folks can find a location, so yes.
Do you have a new estimate on what the total of the 38, how many of them will be issued as a result of this?
The total of open allotments right now is 40, and I can provide you a list of those. I don't have them off the top of my head.
Great. Yeah, that'd be fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Micah. Moving on, Mr. Buchanan.
Yes, if I heard it right, it was a year that somebody, after a year, a license could be transferred or sold. And if that's a fact, it needs to be 5 years. We got to look at all the loopholes in the social equity program on how it cannot be manipulated. And that's definitely, you find somebody that's 51%, they're presented in as the owner. They really, on a backdoor deal, own 1 or 2%. And in a year, it's transferred over into the straw owner. And straw is hidden owner, a hidden purchaser that was there the whole time. So this particular approach that is on these rules allow for major manipulation to happen. And so what I'm saying is that we know that going into it right now. And as we do, hopefully the necessary changes will be made to assure that the licenses get into the folks that which it was designed based on the statistics from the state that provided to create a social equity program, it happens for. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Buchanan. Last I have on my list, Mr. Asai.
Yes, thank you. So, okay, I just wanted to clarify, and I think Kathleen clarified it. So now there is 40 social equity licenses available. Is that correct right now as of today?
That is correct.
Okay, because the initial number was 39, and out of those 39, 16 were in non-banned moratorium areas. So I guess I'm curious to know the one that was added just recently, I guess in the last few months, is that one, are you able to answer that? Is that one in a banned area, or is that one in an area that's not banned? And my other question.
Great question, Mr. Asai. I would have to look into that. I don't have it remembered. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, and then my other question in section 5, in regards to the mobility, that's great. As I have spoken before many times about these need to be mobile. I guess my question is if the LCB can make them mobile within the county, I guess why isn't they're not able to make them mobile within the whole state? And I already understand that it needs to take legislative action, but it's just, it seems like that's a step in the right direction, but it's like not all the way there. So anyway, I'm just curious how the LCB has the power to do it within the county, but not the state.
It's a great question. The statute is specific that we must allocate stores by county. So you're right, we would have to get legislative approval to be able to have mobile stores.
Okay, but within the county, or are you talking about mobile stores within the state?
We would need legislative approval for stores to be able to go anywhere, to move allotments anywhere throughout the state. But the law as it stands now, we can allocate by county.
Okay, understand. Okay, so the LCB has the power to do it within the county. Okay, so you know that's a start. I mean, it's not where we would like it, but that's a start. And my last comment, or actually two more. In section 5, number 4, it says qualifying for social equity program will not result or guarantee cannabis business license approval. Social equity applicants must meet all license qualifications in chapter 314.55. So I guess I'm confused there because back in section 2, it says you only need to meet 2 qualifications. But here it's saying social equity applicant must meet all license qualifications. So if the LCB can elaborate more on that. And then in the next section, I just maybe need some more explanation as far as the license is not to be transferred within the first year. And then it says something, and then it goes in, it says the requirements for initial licensure as a social equity applicant for a period of 5 years from the date of transfer. I guess I just need some more explanation just on what that exactly means. Thank you. Kathleen, you're muted.
So, Caitlin, I'm wondering if you can offer some assistance on the kind of the way that the social equity application process works and moves into licensing for the actual cannabis business license. I think that speaks to that first slide that you walked us through. So perhaps maybe kind of giving us another overview of that slide, perhaps.
So the social equity criteria is specific for social equity applicants. So to qualify for the program, you have to meet the social equity criteria, which we've been going over today. In order to receive a license, you have to meet all of the licensing requirements outlined in WAC. So that's securing a location, a criminal history review, submitting an operating plan, and having a final inspection. There's those other items that will need to be completed prior to receiving a license.
Okay. And then, Mr. Asai, I think you had one other question about the year requirement Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes, section 5, in 5, the last part.
Yes.
Yes, I just needed just some more clarification on the first year, and then it says here, the requirements for initial licensure as a social equity applicant for a period of 5 years from the date of transfer. So I guess I'm just need some clarification on exactly what that means.
All right, again, turning to Caitlin for a response. Thanks, Caitlin.
Yeah, I'll respond, Kathy. That so something that Mr. Buchanan had said is that that we're looking at the right folks getting that applying for and owning these licenses. So for the first year, someone a licensee or couldn't sell their license to anyone else. After that year, they could sell their license or sell their business, sell their business, not their license. You can't sell a license. They could sell their business, but only to an individual or an entity that met the social equity requirements. So those would go back through and be scored again by that third party vendor. Is that helpful?
Okay, so yes and no. So then the part of the 5 years, is that meaning after 5 years that the business can be sold and not be a social equity applicant? Is that what the verbiage means?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. So I think we can take one more comment. Is there, Robert, do we have any more hands up?
So we have 5 additional hands up, and I'm going off of how I wrote it down, and it's not in the order that's showing up. The first person I had up next with their hand up was Tim Laux. After that, the order I had in the hand raising was Justin Guest, Osaze Wilson, and I had Jim Buchanan before, but he lowered his hand, and then Philip Petty, and then James Buchanan. So Tim Laux, according to what I wrote down, if we're only taking one comment, I want to make sure I have it right, was the next person that raised their hand.
Okay, so we do have 20 minutes left in this session. But what I'd like to do is we'll go ahead and take Tim's comment. Well, why don't we just take all 4? If folks can keep it down to, again, as brief as possible, that would be great, so we can move we can move on to section 6, and then it looks like we might be concluding just a little after 4. But again, just really encourage folks to keep comments as brief as possible so we can hit section 6 and then close a little just slightly after 4. So Tim, if you would go ahead, we'd appreciate hearing from you.
Tim, you were unmuted for a brief moment. If you want to try that again.
Can you hear me? All right. I too was a pioneer in the industry, starting a dispensary before the initiative came out, and because of my background, made me ineligible to get a license legally in the state of Washington because I had felons and whatever, and that pushed me out and really economically impacted me and my family because we were surviving on that during some real hard times. But I'm wondering if I'd be eligible to get my license back and dispense medical marijuana or recreational marijuana. Because I had a license for a dispensary prior to the Initiative 502, and when I did apply for the license, I was denied.
So I guess this creates a process for you to reapply. Again, reaching out to Caitlin or Becky, I don't think there would be anything to prohibit you from that opportunity. We've done some, as Justin noted a little earlier, some revision in rule to relax some of the background check rules. So anything that anyone else would like to offer?
So I would invite you to give us a call. They always hesitate to go into individuals' background in public. So if you want to reach out to myself or to Caitlin, and it's Rebecca, REBECCA.Smith, SMITH, @lcb.wa.gov, I would certainly be willing to have a conversation.
Great, thank you, Becky.
Thank you.
Thanks for your question, Tim.
So-
Next up, Justin. Oh, go ahead, Justin. Sorry.
So if I could just jump in real quick, if I understand the question right, just so we capture it in our notes. I think the question was, would somebody who had applied for the license before, got denied because of the criminal history, would they be granted that license? And I kind of got the sense that you were asking, would these rules allow for an automatic license for that purpose? And that's currently not in the conceptual draft rule. So if you were suggesting us considering that as an inclusion, or were you just exploring the eligibility from before? I'm not sure I was clear on the comment.
Well, also suggesting the eligibility, but asking for clarification if possibly that bumps me up on the list to be eligible for a new license which you guys are issuing, or where would that put me in the standings that, I was already in operation, but then when the initiative came out, I had to close my doors because of ineligibility to receive a license at that time.
Okay, so just from a suggestion perspective, I would capture that you are suggesting that we provide consideration to that scenario.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Tim. Moving on to Justin.
Hello. Okay. I have really one question for all the participants after listening to a lot of what they had to say and their concerns with this bill. One of my questions is, would they have a problem with unlimited licenses and the ability for anybody applying to get a license? Because I know that they are limited licenses and they aren't opening up more licenses, but what would your concerns be with unlimited licenses and the ability for anybody who's applying for a license to get one, if that was the case? And also, do you feel that the limited licenses as they stand right now, because much with my concern and everybody else's concern, it's who's going to get these licenses as they come back onto the market? Do you feel that the limited licenses create animosity and anger amongst the different groups that are claiming that they've been disparaged in the past by the languages used by limited licenses? And do you feel that if we got together and worked as a community to open up and make unlimited licenses instead of limiting the licenses, that it would in fact work for our benefit and not instead of theirs? Thank you. That's all I have to add.
Okay, thank you. And I think that question was for everyone on the call to contemplate. That's how I'm understanding it. Is that correct, Justin?
Yes, that was correct. Because
Okay.
everybody's concern is the same, is who's going to get these licenses. And I just feel that if we had an unlimited license where anybody who applied was allowed to get one, and we had the laws that whoever broke the laws after they got a license was condemned and fined and had to adhere to whatever restrictions came after that, that would be fine. But to restrict the licenses at the very beginning and limit them only creates nepotism, and it creates hatred amongst different minorities and different groups and different people, however they want to look at it. So I feel that a free and open market, laissez-faire, just to allow anybody who's applying that can jump through the hoops of, yes, they have the correct kitchen or they have the correct dirt or whatever other regulations you guys feel that you want to apply to gaining one of these licenses, as long as everybody's open to it, no matter what their background, their ethnicity, their heritage, allow them to apply and get a license. I feel that would be beneficial to everyone, and it would stop everybody's fear of, oh, I didn't get it because of X or because of Y or because of Z. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Justin. And Robert, can you help me pronounce the next name for me?
So my understanding is it's Osaze, at least from
Okay.
someone that I know named Osaze, but please correct me if I'm wrong.
So please, Asasi.
Osaze Wilson.
You may have to escalate.
Okay, let me try that. Okay. Osaze, you've been elevated or escalated to present. Are you able to unmute?
Can you all hear me now?
Yes.
Good afternoon. I have, first of all, you got my name correct. Thank you so much. That was great. I have just a point of clarification first and then a question. Point of clarification, and I'm sorry if this is a bit redundant. The pool of available licenses are previously revoked or discontinued licenses that must stay in their original jurisdiction of issuance. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. And just a question on the RFPs for the third-party review of these licenses. Are the RFPs going to be limited to a specific type of entity or business formulation? Are we talking about specifically looking for law firms to do this review, consultants, cannabis consultants? Curious who exactly is going to be doing or who government will be entrusting to do this type of review?
We'll certainly be looking for experience, right? We're not looking for a law firm. We're looking for somebody that has experience in doing just that, is being able to score and review social equity applicants or applications. And we know that there are folks out there, third-party vendors in other states that have been successful. So, that I would say once qualifications come out in the next month or so, we'd certainly put that RFP on our website.
Thanks for your time.
Hey, Kathy, if I could, and I'll ask my licensing colleagues to correct me if I'm wrong. Feel free to do that. But I hear the same question kind of coming up, and I think there's some confusion. So when we're talking about the jurisdiction issue, currently we license down to the local jurisdiction or the city level, and we're raising that up a level to the county, which is what's required in statute. So when we talk about it has to stay within the jurisdiction, we're talking the county jurisdiction, not necessarily the current city jurisdiction, if that makes sense. So there'll be a broader jurisdiction that these can be cited on. However, it would still, based on how the original licensing was set up through the RCW, it would have to be at the county level without a legislative change, but it'll raise up from the city jurisdiction to the county. So it is broader than it was before. And I think that if I'm hearing right, there is some confusion on what the jurisdictional terminology means. I hope that helps.
It did, Mr. Norton. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, next on that I see on my list is Mr. Petty. And I think we saw you go on camera a couple of times, Mr. Petty, so
Can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, okay. So I just so we have, it's how many licenses that we have now? And I thought it was 20 licenses that were in moratorium. Is it more? Or because I heard Michael say it was 16, isn't it 20?
So there are 40 total for the program, and I would have to go back and pull the list of the ones that are in bans or moratorium, and I can certainly do that at a later time. I don't have them memorized right this second.
And then my other question was, how many of those are in Western Washington? Just a general idea. How many of those are in the Western Washington area?
I will have to provide that information back to you.
Okay,
I
no
believe we can
problem.
get that information on our website.
Okay, and then lastly, I just wanted to just say that, the reason why we're having a social equity and equality program and why the governor, in his 4 buckets made a priority was because, and I think I heard Justin speak, it was just that in the very beginning, Justin and group, if we had all fairly been given licensing at the very beginning, then we wouldn't be having this committee right now.
I understand that.
Okay, so all I'm saying is that because the group that was harmed the most by the war on drugs,
yes,
this group is given an opportunity to create some economic wealth in their communities because they haven't been able to do so because of the charges. And it's
but the way you want it done
like
is to
2 to 1.
disparage another group
But you
to get
had
in
82.
front of,
So
I need to step in
I'm not
here.
saying, and I'm just why I can
Please.
talk, Justin. I just
No,
want to
we're
talk.
not
So
going to debate. Sorry.
86% of the people who own
Philip?
licenses are white.
Philip, I'm going to have to mute you if I can't speak here. So this can't be a debate amongst participants. We really
I
need
was
to
just
focus on the.
clarifying. Well, could you clarify to the group, why are we having a social equity and equality? Why are we doing these licenses like this? And why is it called social equity and equality? Just give them a statement so they understand what it is, because I'm not against Justin. I'm just saying that I would feel the same way if I didn't know what this was all about. And I think there are people on this call that don't know what this is all about. They just think it's a group of licenses, and they're probably confused why a certain a group of people will get these licenses and maybe they don't qualify. So could you give us a statement on what social equity and equality is?
Well, I guess I could try.
Okay, thanks, Justin.
Yeah, you bet. So when we're looking at the social equity dynamics here, we recognize that that the licensing that has occurred thus far is not a representation of communities across the state. And there was a number of folks that were involved in the cannabis industry before. Some didn't qualify because of criminal history. Some didn't qualify for financial, and I hope I have that right. But there's a number of reasons people didn't qualify, and we're trying to reduce those barriers and provide this as a more equitable approach so that the folks that feel that they're not included in this particular opportunity in this business have that opportunity. And we're trying to right the wrongs of the past, if you will, because the system that is set up, and some of this is even, we're still facing today with the statute constrictions on trying to implement some of the issues. We're trying to create an opportunity so that folks that have been disproportionately impacted over the years have an opportunity that they didn't have before.
Right. Okay, thank you. And I just wanted to, have that so people actually know what we're doing and why we're having these discussions and why the task force and all of the work that we did previous, it was done for that single purpose. And so, and there were recommendations that were made, and I know that you're utilizing some of them, but I think that, we need to look at that just because the time that we took to draft it and then the recommendations and rubric that you came up with afterwards, you're talking about a year and a rubric that you guys came up with in a month or two or less. So I was just saying, I would feel better as a community person and part of the community that was harmed. I would feel better that when making an amends process to that community, that you would take their input to heart, because that's how we're going to feel better. And if we feel better, it's going to be a benefit to everybody in the state, not just us, but everybody. So that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have 3 minutes left. And I'm not sure that we're going to get to section 6. And I'm wondering if I'd like to move on to section 6. I know there, I see a variety of hands up. Kind of want to connect with colleagues. What is our sense of going over by maybe 5 minutes, or would we like to, are we okay with that? All right. So if I may, I'd like to move on to section 6 so we can make sure that we complete our session today and we hear from as many as possible on the entire draft conceptual rule set. So if you had comments that you wish to offer with respect to section 5, again, we invite you to submit those to the rules inbox. I'd like to move on to section 6 then, related to application withdrawal. And I believe we can get this on the screen in one page, hopefully. And yes, it looks like almost. So just briefly, this kind of talks about why the board might withdraw a social equity application, under what circumstances that might happen. So if the social equity program application or materials are determined to be incomplete by the social equity contractor, or the social equity program application materials aren't timely received by the social equity contractor, or the applicant requests withdrawal of the application at any time during the process. So turning to Robert, how many hands did we see rise for section 6, Robert?
Well, I was gonna say we had one. We have 5 that were still up from the previous section. We had one that briefly raised their hand, Pat Delarty or Pat Delanty, but I think they just lowered their hand. So we have 5 hands raised. All of them are still residual from the previous section.
On section 4, so just checking in on the hands that are still raised. If you don't wish to speak to this section, really hoping that you can put down your hand, but if you do wish to speak to this section, please keep your hand raised. So, Robert, do we still have raised hands? How many do we have and who are they?
Only one of the 5 took the offer to lower their hand. So we have James Buchanan, Peter Manning, Justin, and Emerald City Collective Gardens.
Okay, so Mr. Buchanan, Peter Manning, say that again, Justin, did I hear that right?
That's correct. And then Emerald City Collective Gardens.
Okay, so we've got 4. All right, we're going to go ahead and cap it at 4 for this last section. And let's go ahead and start with Mr. Buchanan. And again, if we can keep it brief, that would be very helpful. Thank you, sir.
Well, mine isn't about this section, so I'll wait until folks about this section say what they have to say and then come back on if possible.
Okay, thank you for that. Let's move on to Mr. Manning.
Me too. My hand is raised because I think it's pertinent to speak about the last section. This section, number 6, is great, but there's no problem with it. I don't see any problem with it, but I do have a problem with the last section. I just want to give clarity to, I think that we aren't sending the right message to everybody out there. There's not enough history known about how we got to where we're at. And that's why we have so many conflicts with other individuals that are showing up and people, they don't have a clear context of how we got here. And how we basically got here, there was not enough Black people included in this cannabis industry from the onset. And there was a ruckus made about that particular problem. And social equity is what came out of that soil. And that's what we are here doing now to correct that. And it seems like we all are basically forgetting that. Paula Sardina's pioneered this movement. She really got out there and made us aware of what and how it had transpired. And Aaron Barfield, myself started the movement back in 2015. So what I want to say is we're not attacking any particular group. We're not saying we don't want any particular group to benefit. What we're telling people is like, hey, dude, we were victimized the most. The war on drugs. We were overlooked. We got these weed stores predominantly in our Black neighborhoods now, and we're not benefiting. We're only consumers, or got the illusion of inclusion going on. We are bodyguards standing outside, or we are bud tenders. That's really what the message should be to everyone that comes here. They should be able to see that, and it should be clear. It should be clarity and transparency when we talk about that. We're here to make amends for what was done wrong to Black and brown people. That is it, period. And I think when people get all confused, social equity was brought about because of that. The soil we planted it in was because there was inequality in the cannabis industry about Blacks and Mexicans, period. This is why we're here. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manning. All right, I'd like to move on to Justin, please.
I'd just like to add that I continue this just continues to prove my point that having limited licenses and putting who's going to get them is causing people to get angry, because allowing not allowing but trying to right a wrong that was done in the past by doing another wrong doesn't fix the problem. And allowing unlimited licenses is, I believe, a step in the right direction. It doesn't correct what was done in the past to the extent that what they're looking for, but it is a more fair opportunity for everyone moving forward, without creating more animosity than needs to be created already. Thank you.
Well, can I please comment on that thing?
I would love, but they're going to mute one of us.
Yeah,
so sorry.
No, we're not.
We're not going to go back and forth. Please. We're not going to spend the time to go back and forth.
Okay,
please.
all right. It just
so one of the things that I do need to address that particular set of comments. The unlimited comment or the unlimited licenses is not within the board's ability right now legally. So that's not something that we can actually do. We have a limited number of licenses, and we're trying to make the best impact to correct those wrongs with a limited pool of licenses. And if there's going to be a broader sense of more licenses added, that needs to go through a legislative process. So if that's, your input, if that's the focus of that particular issue, I do encourage you to reach out to your legislators and share that with them, because that's not necessarily within the scope of this rulemaking package. So
yeah, all I'm trying to point out is that limited licenses are the root of the problem, and resupplying limited licenses to
and again,
this is just hacking out a limb. It's not cutting the tree.
This is not going to be about unlimited licenses. So thank you.
I understand. I'm just making people aware what unlimited licenses has the potential to do, and that we should be fighting for unlimited licenses and not who gets what licenses that are limited. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Justin. Next, I'd like to move on to Mr. Asai, who is next in line.
Yes, thank you. I just want to get some information out there that I have at the regarding the allotment. And I know Philip had asked the question, what was the number? Based off the form that I have got, this is a while back from the LCB. So in the Western District, the number that I have is 25 total in Western Washington. Out of those 25, 14 are open, 11 are closed. So I just wanted to give some clarification on that. Just in my last statement here, I'm fully behind Black Excellence in Cannabis, Paula Sardinas, Ollie Garrett, those who were very instrumental in getting us to where we are. We as Emerald City, and I just want people that are on here to understand, you can Google Emerald City Collective Gardens. Okay, we were established in 2010. This is our flyer. This is our business card. We were licensed. We paid taxes. We did everything the right way. It's frustrating because we should have qualified and did qualify with 5052. There were retailers, current retailers, that were medical like us, that were not transparent in what they were doing in their business model. But yet, they could have sold magazines, be very vague in what they were doing, and they were able to get a license. Community, it wasn't just Black, it wasn't just Mexican. There were also white establishments that were cut out in 5052. And that needs to be known and said. But the main issue is that Blacks have been affected by the war on cannabis more than anybody else in this country. And these are facts. There was white attorneys telling Black collectives not to get licensed, not to pay taxes. And then when it came time for 5052 implementation, a lot of them couldn't even put an application in because they weren't licensed and they didn't pay taxes. But we did. We didn't listen to that gibberish that was told by a lot of white attorneys in Seattle. And that affected a lot of Black ownership. And I just, for me, Google Emerald City Collective people and understand that we were pioneers and we were in this just like a lot of others. And it's very frustrating because we should have been grandfathered in. As Rick Garza had stated in October 12, 2020, LCB public meeting. He apologized. He knew it was done wrong. 2870 is, and I would encourage people to go read 2870 because it's not about unlimited license. 2870 focuses on the licenses that have been taken back and that are sitting dormant. It doesn't talk about former medical, but understand this, ladies and gentlemen, 2870 and why we're here is because of former medical pioneers who fought the fight and got us to where we are. So even though it may not have the language in there, understand that former Black and brown medical pioneers are the reason why we are here, along with Ollie Garrett, Paul Sardinas, and the help of Governor Inslee. And so I just encourage people to go read 2870 so they can understand why we're here. And that's pretty much all I have to say. And the last thing, it's unfortunate that we're having these robberies right now. When we were in the medical days, it was nothing like this. We were able to protect ourselves in different ways, whether it was different levels of protection of coming into the collective. A lot of being Black and brown owned may have had something to do with it, but it's unfortunate that we have these robberies, and it's unfortunate that we have current retailers who were bashing medical and saying that we need to get rid of medical because of robberies. And it was a lot of lies that were being said in regards to medical to get us cut out. And here we are now, where the things that supposedly was happening years ago is happening now. And it's not just about cash on site. There's other particulars that are involved, and I won't go into details, but maybe I'll talk about that more in detail at the meeting that the LCB has next week in regarding the robberies. But there's a lot more that's going on with that. And so anyway, with that being said, thank you today. Thank you for letting me speak. And thank you for the LCB's time. And I just hope that the LCB understands the frustration from the Black and brown community, especially the former medical pioneers who should be in the game and who did qualify but got cut out. We were very transparent on what we were doing. You can look up Emerald City Collective Gardens, and we said on our Secretary of State that we are providing medical marijuana for medical patients and medical members. A lot of current retailers that were in medical were not transparent, and it's been known to me how they could.
You need to wrap up, Mr. Asai.
Okay. It's just been known to me how they could have got approved and qualified, and they weren't transparent about who and exactly what they are. We were advertised. We were all over the place. Thank you, and I look forward to speaking again.
All right. And I think the final person we had in line was Jim Buchanan. Robert, is there anyone else? At this point, I'm kind of inclined to say, let's have Mr. Buchanan speak, and then we will wrap up.
So James Buchanan still is up, and after him with their hands up are Peter Manning and Jeff Merriman. Mr. Sy from Emerald City Collective Garden still has his hand up, but I think that's just residual.
Okay, so we have Mr. Buchanan, Jeff Merriman.
And Peter Manning, I think, raised his hand again as well.
Okay, so if I may, Peter, if you can, Mr. Buchanan hasn't spoken to this section yet, neither has Mr. Merriman. Since you've already provided comment, I think we'll wrap up after Mr. Buchanan and Mr. Merriman speak. And then again, we welcome your comments in written form as well. And then we'll wrap up after Mr. Merriman. So Mr. Buchanan, if you could keep your comment brief, and Mr. Merriman as well, we would appreciate it. And then we'll wrap up. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. If we were able to delete the personal advertisements that everybody had, we'd have plenty of time left to talk. But with all that being said, speaking on the pioneer things, hey, we're not going to get in going back and forth on who started. Marijuana's been around 1,000 years, and so has the harm from it, from our community. It's been around a very long time. So pioneers go way beyond any of us on this call. I would like to ask the LCB though, with this new rule coming up to be able to allow the licenses to be able to be moved around in a county into a different city, why wasn't that rule implemented 2 years ago?
I am, that's an interesting question. I don't think we had rulemaking started at that point for social equity. I think we were waiting for, I think the Social Equity Task Force had just started their work. I look back at, when was that? You're saying 2 years ago? That was March of.
When House Bill 2870 was developed, shortly after that or even during it, why wasn't immediately this rule put into effect then?
Yeah, I believe that the agency was anticipating the work of the Social Equity Task Force. We were waiting for recommendations that we understood were going to give us direction on what we needed to do in terms of rulemaking. And when some of that work took a little longer than expected, I think there was the pandemic happening. The agency decided to start doing what we could in terms of rulemaking, and that resulted in what we did with the background checks, and then doing what we could in this particular draft conceptual rule set to begin to make those changes. But indeed, we were waiting for Social Equity Task Force to do this work. And want to reach out to other folks on the, Becky, Caitlin, Justin, anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, Kathy, I would absolutely agree. We didn't want to get ahead of the task force. We were always hopeful that we would see some change in law that would allow those licensees, social equity applicants to be able to go anywhere in the state of Washington. So it was premature to be able to start that work and make that happen. That again, try not to get ahead of the task force.
Thank you for the answer.
Sure. Thank you for the question, Mr. Buchanan. And I'd like to call on Mr. Merriman next.
Yeah, so my 2 cents on this is when we judge applicants, I would love to see preference given to some of the people that kind of got left out during the medical days, the dispensaries and stuff like that. Just kind of like what Emerald City Collective is talking about, where we judge them on that rather than skin color. I mean, when we start using skin color to judge an applicant, that's where we further the racism that we have a problem with in our society these days. So I really support judging people for these licenses kind of on their merits, because there was a lot of medical marijuana dispensary stores back in the day that should have been in our market today that got shafted. So I would like to see maybe some preference given to those people that were doing it right over other factors on looking for eligibility in this program. And that's all.
All right, thank you, Mr. Merriman. All right, so checking in with Robert one more time. I see is it Mr. Manning's hand still up?
Yes, we have one hand that has remained up. It's Peter Manning. So I'm not sure if Mr. Manning was going to offer written comment via email, or if he just hasn't lowered his hand.
So just want to check in with you quickly, Mr. Manning, since we do need to close out. We've gone over 20 minutes by now. Is there anything additional that you'd like to offer, or are your comments something that you can offer to us by way of email and we can consider with respect to this rule set?
So Peter Manning was elevated to presenter. I know he had some problems muting and unmuting, but I'm not sure.
I'm sorry, here I am. Just give me a second. I want to say thank you guys for this opportunity for Black Excellence in Cannabis. Can you guys see me? Yeah, thanks. I think it was a great meeting. I think we got a lot off our shoulders or chest, whatever you want to say. You're the gentleman at the top of my screen, what's your name?
Justin? I think you went on mute again, Mr. Manning.
Okay. Anyway, I'd like to thank everybody that participated here, everybody, all 100 and plus, whatever it is. I think that we should all really understand where we come from, the footprint that got us here, and how to correct that is all. Without hostility and animosity. You know, I did predict that this wasn't enough licenses back in 2019 when we first took on this thing. I knew that this wasn't going to be enough, the 39, or actually it was 15 then or something, but I think we should have probably came out with 80 licenses. I think that would suffice, and I think we should probably work to make sure everybody can get in their place, and we should just keep it going and be positive, a positive outlook. Everybody needs to get on a positive tip here, you know, and let's leave everything over there and look forward. That's my message to you guys. Black Excellence in Cannabis, peace, and we respect you all.
All right, thanks very much, Mr. Manning. And that's a great note to conclude on. Again, thank you for staying on for an additional 20 minutes. We really appreciate it. And I just want to say, on behalf of everyone from LCB that's on this call today, we really do appreciate you participating in this listen and learn session today. I can say that I've learned a lot from all of you, and we have a lot of information that you've provided to us and feedback and things for us to think about as we continue to work on these rules to bring this program to life. So I just want to touch with Justin, Becky, and Caitlin before we sign off for this session. So briefly, Justin, any closing words?
Yeah, so again, I echo those comments. Really appreciate everybody turning out, spending the time with us, and sharing your comments. This will not be the only opportunity to comment. I wanted to make sure that I let folks know that. A couple things. Again, if you're going through this draft conceptual rules and you see some language that's very challenging, you see gaps, you see barriers, any of those types of things, please write it down, send it in to the rules email so we can have that for consideration as we move forward. There will be more opportunities as this moves forward and we start massaging the language. And if there are changes, you'll have an opportunity to comment again. And so this is not a one-time conversation, and we encourage folks to keep in touch and watch these rules develop. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Justin. Becky, anything you'd like to offer?
Again, I thank everybody for their time, and I think Peter said it well, so I'm just going to end with that.
Thank you. Agreed. And Caitlin, anything?
Nothing additional. Thanks, Kathy.
Of course. All right, so with that, just offering a little bit of information, if you have, there's that rules website, our rules inbox if you have questions or you want to submit additional comments. Please do so. There's also a portal that you can submit questions to licensing if you have any questions about the social equity program development, pardon me, or the licensing process. Next steps for us is to take all this material back and consider it, as I mentioned. And again, I'd like to thank you all for the gift of your time today and sharing your important and meaningful feedback with us and the stories that you shared. So with that, we'll go ahead and conclude today's sessions, and we look forward to connecting with you in the very near future. Have a great afternoon and take care all. Thank you.